And welcome into the Monday edition of Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Ryan Porth here with you on this Monday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. This playoff Monday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. Game one between the Nashville Predators and the Carolina Hurricanes taking place tonight. We've got a lot to get to regarding that today here on the show. Predators president and CEO Sean Henry dropping by at 7:30. We'll get into that a little bit more with him, including some information on home games coming up in games 3, 4, potentially game 6 of this series as well. Don't miss that at 7:30. Corey Curtis at 8 o'clock, Darren McFarland at 9 o'clock, and then at 9:30, Pierre McGuire from NBC Sports will join us as well. So a lot to get to today regarding the Nashville Predators. Taking your thoughts as well on our text line all show long, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Joe Rexrode, how we doing? What's going on, brother?
We're doing all right. I mean, I know it's playoffs and everything, but I really want to hear about the Grand Canyon today. I think we should take the whole show and listen to what I did on my summer vacation, Stanley family style.
Well, I will say this. It was an awesome time. Going through Arizona is basically like traveling through a different planet. I mean, we did a lot of driving on this trip, too, going from the Grand Canyon down to Antelope Canyon, to Page, Arizona, down to Sedona. Like, we basically went all through the state. It's like Mars out there. But the Grand Canyon was awesome. I've never seen anything quite like it in my entire life. And I think I could have stayed there for 2 weeks straight and just continued to see new things. But we did that. We did some kayaking to Antelope Canyon. It was awesome. Going through Sedona, just hiking all over the place. My entire lower body hurts at this point. So it was a good time. I enjoyed it.
And this was camping and not glamping. Is that right?
Oh no,
we
no.
Sure.
There were hotels involved. Yeah, there was no camping going on. The wife's not going to be camping.
Okay, that's all right.
There was a lot of glamping going on. Yeah, but it worked out.
That's probably a place where you'd want to glamp out there anyway, right? With that wildlife.
Yeah,
right?
you could run into some things. That's for sure. Yeah, I mean, that's probably a place to glamp. It was a great time. Got in the outdoor air, and I feel rejuvenated. Rexrode. It was a good little getaway.
Good. Well, ready for a couple months of playoffs. So there you go.
Exactly. All fired up and ready to go for a couple months of playoffs now here on the show. As Vince on Twitter points out, we're vibing today here on the show. And, Joe, it feels like we've been kind of getting ready for this matchup for the Predators forever at this point. They closed out the season with 2 games against Carolina, and we basically had a week now to talk about this game and this matchup heading into the playoffs. Now we are here. It is game 1 tonight between the Predators and the Carolina Hurricanes. As you look at this matchup, what are your initial thoughts? What do you think the Predators need to do starting tonight to get off the jump on the right foot? What do you think? What do you expect to see out of the Predators tonight?
Well, I think the Predators have to play exactly as they played in the last 2 games, but again, especially in the next to last game, because that's actually the game that you could really bring forward. So I think that they've got to play like that. And I think that they've got to be ready to have a team come out on them, kind of like Carolina came out on them. I think it was April 19th or maybe April 17th, but you guys know the game I'm talking about. First period, 24 shots. Saros under absolute siege and really did an incredible job. I mean, that's the Carolina I expect to see. So what's the Nashville team? I mean, you've got to be able to dictate some of your terms too, and you can't just be, defending all night and trying to handle those waves. You've got to give it back to them. So, I mean, that the first period alone, the first few minutes of the first period is going to be fascinating.
It is, and I got to watch a little bit of the playoffs over the weekend, and especially the game last night between Florida and Tampa Bay. I mean, there's an element to this now that you've not had to deal with much throughout the regular season, and that is, having some people in the building, having some energy in the building as the road team that you've got to go up against and that you've got to combat. Now, I mean, there are 9,000 people last night in Florida just going crazy, and that's going to be more and more the case as we get through the playoffs here with more and more teams. But that's something also starting on the road. It's not your normal playoff environment on the road, but it's more than you're used to dealing with at this point heading into an opposing building. So I'm fascinated to see how this Predators team, particularly some of the young guys who've not been in this situation before, how they respond when one of those momentum shifts or things that inevitably is going to happen throughout the course of a hockey game that you're on the other side of. You got to find a way to dig your way out of it. I'm interested to see how some of these young guys respond to that starting tonight in Carolina.
Yeah, that's a good point. It is different, and you really haven't had to deal with anything like that. I mean, first of all, the games have all been great, but like that Florida-Tampa Bay game last night was like just put it in my veins.
It was awesome.
It was so good, and it was so cool to like see these things happening, and then like a crowd going nuts. I mean, and I know it's not like that's the first time, but that struck me as I was watching it. Also, worked out well with the whole Kucherov situation for Tampa Bay.
Turns out he might be pretty good.
Yeah. And gosh, I mean, he just got healthy just in time. It's amazing. that little pass, like that power play goal where he just swings it over to point, with Bobrovsky completely bought in. I mean, there's an example. They're just ridiculous. But yeah, that was fantastic and a little taste of what's to come. And you're right. It's actually a factor. Like the crowds are actually a factor. Certainly in this series. I mean, this will be the most attended series of all of them in the first round. And we know that it matters here. And certainly it has mattered for Carolina in past postseasons as well.
Ryan Port, the Preds in Game 1 tonight. What's your excitement level heading into this matchup? What do you expect to see out of this Predators team tonight in Carolina?
I expect to see a lot of what we've seen in the last 2 months. Whether or not that gets them in the win column tonight, that remains to be seen, obviously, but I don't think they're going to come out and be intimidated by the Canes, intimidated by the atmosphere. I think this team thrives off being an underdog in the playoffs, and I think they're going to put their best foot forward.
I will say this, and maybe this is just me reading too much into something, I don't know, but it feels like even with the Arizona series last year and just the way this team has been trending, there was kind of an uneasiness to the playoffs a little bit. I don't know how this series is going to work out, and we're going to talk about kind of the picks against the Predators coming up in the next segment. I picked Carolina to win this series in 6 games. Carolina, as we'll soon find out and talk about here in just a few minutes, a very popular pick in this matchup against the Predators. So I don't know how this is going to work out in terms of how it affects the play on the ice and whether or not they win this series. But it does feel kind of different heading into this series. Like you feel like your team's not going to go in there and just get absolutely pushed around or just get totally punked like they have in that Dallas series, or just the negativity entering the Arizona series with all the uncertainty. I mean, there is kind of a different vibe to this group, no pun intended, to what we've seen, I think, in the last couple of years. Again, I don't know what that's going to translate to on the ice, but it does, at least from my vantage point, feel a little bit different heading into this matchup.
Yeah, that's interesting. I would agree that there's more – I think there's definitely more good feelings just about how the team's playing. Because, I mean – now, I will say, I mean, I thought they'd beat Dallas. I think most people picked them to beat Dallas. They did like win the division there at the very end. So I think that series, it was Game 1 that was like the smack in the face, wasn't it? That's as I remember it. It was like,
yeah.
They got punked, they got pushed around, and then it went from there. But yeah, I mean, obviously last year it was one of those things where it's like, I think last year it was like, gosh, they can't lose to Arizona, right? Like, they're not going to lose to Arizona, are they? Well, yes, they are. But it certainly wasn't a ton of there wasn't a ton of excitement. And I think there is excitement. I mean, the problem is, I'm watching the game with Brennan last night, and, it's like, yeah, by the way, if the Preds win their series, they get one of these two guys next. I mean, it's an incredible road for them to make any kind of run. But, hey, if they do, they will absolutely have earned it.
I don't think there's any question about that. And look, if the playoff matchups that we've seen so far are any indication, we're in for a doozy tonight. I mean, I think the best game so far has been Florida and Tampa Bay, and it's the one game that didn't go to overtime. Like, we've had some overtime games. I caught a little bit of Washington and Boston. It was great. I mean, the intensity right from the jump in that game. I mean, Ovechkin's throwing hits around. I mean, it's just hits left and right. That's the style I think the Predators are going to try to play tonight against Carolina. You're going to try to beat them up a little bit, to be physical. Obviously, the herd line coming in there leading the way in that department. But to your point, Joe, when you think back to that Saturday night game that the Predators had to have and the formula that they followed when you had more of a full strength on full strength lineup between the Predators and Hurricanes, I think that's the formula the Predators are going to try to replicate tonight in Game 1. And so far, the playoffs have been awesome up until this point. One thing that's not been awesome for Predators fans is to see kind of how the predictions have gone with the Predators against the Hurricanes, at least from the national media. There's a lot of disrespect to the Nashville Predators. I don't think necessarily something that we did not see coming, but it's led to some interesting reactions that I've seen on social media. We'll talk about that a little bit more coming up here in just a few minutes, though. Right now, got to tell you about my friends at FanDuel Sportsbook, and the NBA play-in tournament gives some teams one last shot to make the playoffs, but everyone can bet this round risk-free on FanDuel Sportsbook. It doesn't matter if you're new to FanDuel or if you already have an account. FanDuel has teamed up with basketball legends Charles Barkley and Kenny Smith to make sure you'll get your money back if you don't win. That's any user, any bet type, any game. The NBA play-in tournament is going down May the 18th through the 21st, and FanDuel just made it even more exciting. It's all part of FanDuel's Play-In Palooza. So if you already have a sportsbook account, just open the app and opt in to claim your risk-free bet. And if you're new to FanDuel, sign up with promo code ROB to get your first risk-free bet up to $1,000 exclusively on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. You must be 21 or older and present in Tennessee. Refund issued is non-withdrawable site credit that expires in 7 days. New user risk-free bet for first real money wager only, and refund issued as non-withdrawable site credit that expires in 14 days. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Got a gambling problem? Call the Tennessee Red Line at 1-800-889-9789.
Colton Sissons just mentioned, being on the road, starting on the road, not always a bad thing, considering if you can take one of those games and sort of set the tone and then go back to your house, you can kind of change things in terms of momentum.
The focus really is just on game one. I think we have to take it game by game, and whether you're on the road, whether you're at home, you got to find a way to win games. So I think it's just really just focusing on the challenge that's right in front of you. And for us, it's game one in Carolina. And, I think we'll be ready for that game and take the result, good or bad, and then get ready for game two.
That was Predators head coach John Hynes discussing the focus heading into game one. Very similar to what John Hynes has been preaching all season long at this point. They've basically been in the playoffs for the last 2 months, fighting for their lives coming down the stretch. And that's going to be the approach they take into this game one as well. One at a time, baby. That's been the approach that John Hynes has had the whole time over the last run the Predators have been on here. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Taking your thoughts on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Now, Joe, I said before I left to go to the Grand Canyon last week that my prediction for this series was Carolina in 6. I think the Predators are going to make it competitive. I think it's going to be a really fun series. I just really like the firepower that Carolina has heading into this series. And I was wondering, once these predictions started to come out, exactly what this was going to look like and how overwhelming of a favorite Carolina was going to be, at least from a national media standpoint. And they're pretty overwhelming. I mean, ESPN.com, 16 out of 16 picked Carolina to win this series. I believe only 7% at The Athletic picked the Predators to win this series. NHL.com had one person pick the Predators to win this series. So you can go through, basically any media outlet that you want to go through from a national scale. You're not going to find very many people that pick the Predators to win this series. I expected that. I expected it to look something like this in terms of what the predictions look like, but I have seen some on Twitter that are wondering why so much disrespect for the Nashville Predators. They're one of the hottest teams in the league. Heading into the playoffs, they have a goaltender that's been playing better than anyone heading into the playoffs as well. And you just closed off the regular season with 2 straight wins and outscored your opponent 8-1 against the team that you're going to be seeing in the first round. Joe, as you've seen these predictions come out over the weekend, looking ahead to this series against Carolina for the Predators, how surprised are you by what we've seen and how overwhelming it's been for Carolina? And do you think that the Predators may be getting disrespected a little bit?
If you think the Predators are getting disrespected, you're just completely disregarding Carolina. People are picking Carolina to win the cup.
Yes.
So, no, I'm not surprised. And I thought it would be – I figured it would be kind of like – so who for NHL.com picked the Preds?
I can't remember. I have to go back and look. But I think it was one person in their poll.
Okay. Because Sportsnet also, it was 0.
Yeah.
Sportsnet was all Carolina. Like you said, ESPN. I also, I must say, I don't want to rip my employer, The Athletic, but why can't we see? I want to see the picks. I don't want to hear 7%. I want to see the individuals who picked the.
We need names.
I was reading that why do we do that this way? Yeah, I want some exactly. Put your name on this stuff. But 7%. Of the Athletic NHL staff picked the Preds. Honestly, that surprised me. If there's anything that surprised me, it's that 7% of my NHL colleagues picked the Preds. So everybody knows that upsets happen in this tournament. And they always will, and so you try to. Some people try to pick the right ones, but it seems like most years people go with just the clear favorite, right? Yeah. And then Carolina is a clear favorite. So I don't know. The Preds can. If I'm the Preds, sure, take it as disrespect if you're the team. But in terms of if you're a Preds fan, you got to understand this isn't just people. In a lot of cases, just dismissing the Preds, it's thinking Carolina can go win this thing. They're good enough to do it. If it broke well for them, they are one of they're on a list of how many teams that are top shelf to me contenders for the cup. I consider them the top tier, along with, Vegas and Colorado, and really Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
Do we count Florida in there too?
I think they look pretty good.
I mean, so who else? Who else is in that tier?
The Vegas odds will say Toronto.
Yeah, until I see it with Toronto, I just don't believe it. I mean, I don't consider Toronto there with Tampa Bay and Colorado and Vegas and these other guys.
Like they don't have a goaltender.
I know. Like eventually you got to stop the puck.
Yeah.
Like that's going to be critical at some point during the playoffs. Like as great as their offense is and Austin Matthews and the firepower that they have, like I just don't consider them right there with some of these other teams. But to your point, Joe, like Carolina, I think they're right there with the Tampa Bays and the Carolinas, or excuse me, the Colorados and the Vegases of the world. By the way, Mike Morial from NHL.com, the lone person to pick the Predators. So shout out to Mike.
Way to go out on a limb there, Mike. I talked to Brian Boucher last week, for a thing I wrote about Saros, and I don't know if they maybe they don't do picks. I'm not sure, but if they did, I think he might pick the Preds. Like he really is buying into the physicality, and I think that's where people are looking at this series and looking at, along with Saros, of course. I mean, you start with Saros, right? The guy's playing well enough to steal a series, or more than that. But the style of play, Boucher, and he pointed back to last year with Carolina too in the bubble. Then if you really get after them, can they handle it in a playoff series? And are the Preds the right team to really get under their skin? So there's an example of someone who at least does not see it as a long shot. I mean, I see people here picking Canes in 4. Hey, it could happen, but that might be a little bit of disrespect. That might be a little bit of dismissal of what the Preds have become.
Well, I think to your point, what Brian Boucher put out there in terms of the style, like I don't think there's any secret heading into this. Like I think if you're the Predators, that's the style you're going to have to play. You're going to have to try to push Carolina around. You're going to have to try to be the more physical team, because I think if you get into this run and gun style that we saw last night with Florida and Tampa Bay, which I know that game was physical, but I mean, you're just trading chances back and forth. Both teams had 39 shots on goal last night. Like if that's the way these games break out, if you're the Predators, you're probably not going to like the end result of that at the end of the day. So there's a certain formula, a certain style that you're going to have to play. And I don't think it's any secret that the Predators are going to try to play that way.
Like I understand, like a lot of people being maybe confused, especially in this market, confused at all the national love for the Canes or the fact that the Preds are being disrespected. But how many national people realistically have watched this team in the last 2 months?
Not many.
Like seriously.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people still have the first 2 months of this season in the back of their heads with this Preds team and using that as a reason to basically, dismiss them in the postseason.
Let's be honest here, too. I mean, I think a lot of what happens in these conversations, too, is there's been so much attention now around UC Saros that they look at him and they say, okay, well, UC Saros is just on an absolute heater right now, and nothing else about this group has changed. If they can find a way to get to Saros, the Predators have no shot. Like I've seen a lot of that. Like some people have reached out to me over the weekend trying to get some background on this, and they're like, so, like, is this as simple as if Saros falters, they're screwed? I'm like, not really. I mean, they've changed it a little bit in terms of the way that they play, but I do think there's a lot of that of just looking at purely the goaltending numbers.
But how much of the national media knows that, and I'm going back to kind of what I said just a minute ago, but how much of the national media truly knows how this team is playing? Because I look at the Islanders-Penguins game yesterday, and the Penguins came in hotter than a $2 pistol. The Islanders were struggling all throughout the second half of the year. The Penguins completely owned the Islanders. The Penguins were 4-0 at home against the Islanders this season, and the Islanders go in there and they play their brand of hockey and they win in overtime and steal game 1. When a lot of people, including myself, were kind of writing off the Islanders because of how they finished the year. That there's a certain brand of hockey that does excel in the playoffs, and I feel like the Preds, this new version of the Preds, play that brand of hockey to an extent.
No, I agree. Look, yes, there's a lot of people making these picks who probably haven't, but I mean, they probably didn't watch them when they were bad either, so
Could be that too.
They didn't watch them when they were bad, didn't watch them when they were good. There's certainly a fair amount of that. I mean, shoot, I will say that I would think there's a lot of people who haven't watched a ton of Carolina either, though. Like, you could flip it around and say, do people really know how good Carolina is when they're right? But I mean, the pick makes. I mean, I will say, if there's a disrespect thing, it was what we talked about last week when Craig Custance, friend of the show, did the anonymous scout, anonymous player, anonymous coach and executive. And they tiered it, and the Preds were alone in the final tier. Yeah. I mean, that's rough, and I think that's probably a little bit of a. And I don't remember which of the, because in each category it wasn't every single one of those. Usually he would take a couple of them to quote them anyway, but they all voted. That to me smacks of, you probably haven't seen what this team has become. I mean, how many people around the league think of the Nashville Predators as what you just said, Porth? This physical playoff style, like heavy, again, tough to play against, like they talked about going into the year team. I don't think too many people, you got to watch them for a couple games, or, I mean, you could probably watch a good period with that fourth line and get a feel for it, but that's not at all what their identity has been. So that's another thing. I think people they think of them as a kind of a finesse team that isn't quite skilled enough to win that way. And they have transformed into something that's probably a little better suited for this tournament.
They have, and I think also this is the time of year when perceptions change and when people really pay attention, and this is how you kind of change what your narrative is as a franchise. Predators have that opportunity beginning tonight in Game 1. We'll continue the conversation on the Predators when we come back. Bob, hang with us on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. We'll get to you coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Ryan Porth here with you on this Monday morning in Nashville, Tennessee, discussing the Nashville Predators, taking your thoughts on our phone and text lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. We'll have some Predators tickets to give away for Game 3 of this series against Carolina coming up at 8 o'clock, so make sure you're tuned in for that. Let's go to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and welcome in Bob from Antioch, who wants to weigh in. Bob, thanks for hanging with us, and thanks for calling in to Robby and Rexrode.
Good morning, guys. In 2018, I felt like the Predators in the playoffs were playing not to lose instead of playing to win, and I also felt that way against Dallas and last year against Arizona. This year, maybe because they dug themselves so deep of the hole, they obviously were playing to win. Do you think it's because the expectations that they had on them the year that they won the President's Trophy, got to their psyche, and now that they really don't have any expectations, they're reacting the way that they are? And then how much of the change in mentality and attitude do you think should be credited to John Hines?
Hey, thanks for the call, Bob. We appreciate it. I mean, I will say this. There's a clear change in mentality. I don't think if you've watched this team over the last couple of months, you could really deny that. I mean, there's a pretty distinct mentality change that has taken place. I think John Hines deserves a lot of credit for that. Like, I don't know if I go back all the way to 2018 in the President's Trophy run, where I think that they just all of a sudden, played not to win. I thought, the series between the Predators and the Jets, it was just two really good hockey teams going at it at that series, and the Jets found a way to get it done in the end. Like, I don't look back at that 2018 series against Winnipeg and the loss that they had and just really view that with overwhelming disappointment like some do. Like, it's a tough loss. It's Game 7 of the second round. Obviously, there were high expectations on that team. You won the President's Trophy. But those were the two best teams in hockey in the regular season, and Winnipeg just found a way to get it done. I view the Dallas series much differently than I do that Winnipeg series. I think Dallas is really when they started to get pushed around, and this idea that maybe they were a little too soft, I think that's when that became very evident in that Dallas series, that this thing was starting to trend the wrong way. And to their credit, they've dug their way out of it, and they have a different vibe, as Bob pointed out, heading into this playoff series. But I don't view the Winnipeg series and the Dallas series the same.
Well, I don't either, but actually I think Bob is more right about Winnipeg. I think that, and just in his point about playing not to lose, that is how I felt Game 7 was. I felt that was a playing not to lose performance. Yeah. And actually you could say Game 5 even. That series is so weird because then they're and then they're in trouble, and they put Hartnell in the lineup, and they actually go hit somebody, and they shut them down in Winnipeg, in games 4 and 6. But they come. I thought that there was a little bit of it. I did not think that was the problem in 19. I don't think it was playing not to lose. I think it was getting your butt kicked. Like, to your point, Robby, that was who were the forwards on this team? Can anyone fight through anything and make any plays? And also, by the way, their defensemen getting thrown around too. Yeah. I mean, that was a physical beating that I think kind of charted, the course for where they are now, but it took a long time to get there too. Obviously, I mean, you can't, you want to get heavier and tougher and all that stuff, but you still have to have people who can play hockey. I mean, now they've found some guys like that. But I would agree with Bob. The mindset, it's a good mindset. It's a good mindset when you go in, and I think most teams in this tournament don't mind at all going in when everybody's picking against you, But you're also playing really well. You've had to play basically playoff hockey to get here. So you found the formula to even get yourself to here. So it's not like you have to all of a sudden make some huge leap into something different to have a chance. Just play the exact same way, and we'll see how difficult Carolina makes it on the Preds to do that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of Predators fans, and we've talked about the comparisons to 2017, which I think sometimes maybe go a little overboard, but I don't think there's any question heading into this series. One comparison that you can draw is there's not going to be a whole lot of people that pick you to win this series, as we discussed in the last segment. And Mattias Ekholm joined Stillman Company on Thursday and talked about that mindset and the idea of maybe facing less pressure externally heading into this series. Here's what Mattias Ekholm had to say.
I mean, there was that one year we won the President's Trophy, and everyone looked at us pretty much coming into the playoffs like they got to carry it over, they got to keep going, whatever. And that puts a little bit of pressure on you as well. You know that you've shown that you can be good in the regular season, and now everyone's looking to go into the playoffs. And playoffs is a complete different thing. And I think I don't necessarily love to go back and look what we did the 17 season, but if you look at that too, we were kind of struggling, and we got in as the last team. There was no pressure. Everything was just bonus, and we got in, and we just run with it. And I feel like that's kind of the same feeling now. It's a really good feeling. You know that what we did here in the last 2 months was really good and got us back to where nobody thought we would be. And here we are, and now we sit with a chance to just run with that as well.
So that was Mattias Ekholm on with Stillman Company. And Joe, that's interesting from a couple of different perspectives. Number one, the Predators are in a different situation this year than they've been in the last few years heading into their opening round series. Not very many people are picking them to win, and not very high expectations for the Predators heading into the playoffs. So I'm interested to see how that mentality affects them. But I think I'm even more interested in how this affects Carolina, because a couple of years ago, they're this darling underdog team that finds their way to the Eastern Conference Final. They've got all these young pieces. I mean, Sebastian Aho's young, Svechnikov's coming in, and they're kind of this darling team in the NHL that nobody has any expectations. Like even last year to a certain degree in the play-in tournament or the qualifying round, whatever you want to call it, there was a lot of people picking the Rangers against Carolina to go in there and win, and they weren't getting a ton of respect based on the way they played, kind of ending the regular season and then heading into that series. There is a ton of expectations now on this Carolina team based on what they've done. This is the first time as a group they've really had to handle that. I'm interested to see not only how does this underdog mindset affect the Predators, but how does the being the overwhelming favorite heading in not only to this series but one of the favorites in the league, how do you handle that if you're Carolina? Because as the Predators have found out firsthand, that's a totally different beast trying to handle those expectations heading into the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. And I think that's in the column of, reasons you think the Preds could really cause trouble for them, is that they have not been in this spot before. Their core group, most of their guys, have not been in this situation. And so I think that's something to look at for sure. You can find every single thing to confirm what you think will happen in a playoff series. You can find a team that's hot that comes in and stays hot, team that's hot that comes in and falls apart, cold, just like you were saying about, or like Porth was saying about, the Islanders, right? I mean, they just come in and it's just different. The playoffs start something different. So that's where I think tonight too is, this tonight could go any which way, and it could be totally different in game two. But I think there is a tone setting that happens tonight. And I know Carolina, I think it's more important for the Preds that they got that win and that they kind of like showed themselves, okay, this can work against these guys. But I think Carolina also is going to have some benefit. Rod Brindamore, I'm sure, when he got back home, was like, it's not so bad to get our butts kicked a little bit there at the end. And these guys maybe listen to me a little bit more in practice now. I've been seeing some accounts of practice, and It sounds like he's been awfully fiery on the ice there. So, they're going to come out looking to counteract that, because that's what people are talking about. Not just the favorite thing and the pressure, but definitely the physicality thing. That's anybody who talks about the Preds having a chance, they talk about Saros, they talk about physicality. Well, if you're the Hurricanes, I'd be listening to that and getting annoyed by it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not to say, and I pointed this out last week too, Carolina they're not the most physical team. They do have guys that can play that way. So
Right.
I think those guys in particular, like Dougie Hamilton's a guy I think about, absolutely can play that way. He's probably listening to some of these conversations the last few days and says, all right, you want to play a little physical hockey? We can play physical hockey. So I'm interested to see how they go about handling that starting tonight. Let's introduce our poll question of the day at 1025 The Game on Twitter. Today's question is this. What is your prediction for the Predators and Hurricanes in round one? Is it the Hurricanes in 4 or 5, the Hurricanes in 6 or 7, the Preds in 4 or 5 games, or the Preds in 6 or 7? Very early in the voting process, 71 votes are in. 43% say the Preds win in 6 or 7 games. 24% say the Hurricanes in 6 or 7 games. 23% say the Hurricanes in 4 or 5. And 10% say the Preds in 4 or 5. So right now, the Preds winning the series in 6 or 7 games, leading the way at 43%. Joe Rexrode, your reaction to the early returns of our poll question.
Come on, you homers. I expect the Preds to win this poll. It's Preds fans, you know?
Yeah.
And so, you know, you should feel confident in your team. That's what I expect to win the poll in the end. Preds in 6 or 7. I love, hey, anybody say Preds in 4, well, bless you.
Yes, come on. Let's bring it. Preds in 4, 10% of the vote, 4 or 5. I like it.
A lot of people would have said bless your heart 4 years ago.
That's true. That is true. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation on the Nashville Predators. Taking your thoughts on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Do we think Ellie Tolvanen will be in the lineup tonight for Game 1 for the Predators? We'll discuss that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 1025 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Ryan Porth here with you on this Monday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. The Predators taking on the Carolina Hurricanes tonight in Game 1 of the Stanley Cup playoffs. The series finally here, getting underway tonight at 7 o'clock. Pregame at 6 o'clock here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. And Joe Rexrode, that leaves us with an interesting question. They've had basically a week now to prepare for this series. With the regular season coming to a close, you've had some practices that you've been able to get under your belt, maybe some bodies that are back available, and it could be in the lineup. We'll see what happens with Victor Arvidsson starting tonight in Game 1. But the question that we started to throw out there last week that I think a lot of Predators fans didn't even think about heading into this series, that now they're starting to, is what's going to happen with Eeli Tolvanen? What is going to be his status for Game 1? Is there a chance that maybe Eeli Tolvanen doesn't play in Game 1 of this series for the Predators against the Carolina Hurricanes? When you factor in maybe Arvidsson's coming back in there, the way the fourth line is played, a lot of the grit that we've talked about as well, and Eeli Tolvanen has struggled down the stretch of the regular season in terms of his production. And John Hines was on the show Friday talking about Eeli Tolvanen and what to expect moving forward here as they head into this series against Carolina. Here's what Predators head coach John Hines had to say.
I think he really got some traction there, and then he got hurt. And then since he's come back off his injury, I know he's working and trying. We're working with him. But he hasn't had the same impact as he's had 5-on-5 or on the power play. So, I think it's the combination of the coaches trying to help the player, but, it ultimately comes down to the player being able to play at a level that we feel he's going to be able to help us win. So, that'll be a decision we'll have to make, whether he's in or out.
So John Hines saying that's a decision regarding Eeli Tolvanen the Predators will have to make, whether or not he's in or out of the lineup for Game 1. Joe, what do you make of those comments by John Hines, and how realistic do you think it is that Eeli Tolvanen is not in the lineup tonight when Game 1 comes around?
Oh, I think it's very realistic. I think it's very real. And I was a little bit surprised by the some of the reaction. We had, of course, Mark Howard, did the show Thursday and Friday, and we were sitting there laughing a little bit at some of the, all of a sudden we're back to John Hines has never seen a hockey puck, like he thinks he's coaching soccer comments, it's just absolutely a non-starter. Look, if I had to pick right now, if I had to guess, and this is reading between the lines, but between those comments and actually even more so David Poyle's comments,
yep,
I'd guess that Tolvanen's out for Game 1. And my guess is that the Arvidsson's in, but also then I would say that on that third line, a Richardson or a Cousins is in where Tolvanen would have been. That's my guess right now. Just those comments, it felt a little bit like preparing people. And I know Hines was just answering our question, but we talked about this before any of this happened on the show, that it's a possibility. He has not been the same since the injury. I would be hesitant to do it because he's just so valuable on the power play, and you've got to score on your power play, I think, to have a chance in this series. I think you have got to be good in special teams. It's always the case in the playoffs, but I think with the firepower Carolina has, when you have real opportunities to score, you have to put your best foot forward, and I think Tolvanen in the left circle is a big part of their best power play in years. So that would be my hesitation. I would probably sacrifice some of what you aren't getting 5-on-5 for that, and I could see it changing quickly. But my guess right now is that they start without that.
I think there's a good chance that they do as well. I think some people hear that and they think, how in the world could you even consider not having Eeli Tolvanen in the lineup based on what he can do on the power play? I think we saw it when he was hot this year, and when he had that shot going in the left circle in the power play. That's a threat that the Predators just haven't had. They just not had that on the power play. So that's a weapon that you're sacrificing if he's not in the lineup. But I don't think there's any question, if you watch him play over the last 3 or 4 weeks, he's not been the same. Now, is that injury related purely? Maybe so. Maybe he's just struggled to get back up to that level since coming back from the injury. But there's a certain way that he was playing, and it wasn't just the goals that he was scoring. I mean, he had speed to his game. He was difficult to knock off the puck. Even in games when Tolvanen wasn't scoring, I mean, he was dangerous. Even 5-on-5, he was dangerous with what he was doing out there. And I've not felt like he's been dangerous in a good while now. Even on the power play, he's not been all that dangerous as of late. So I think that's a real decision that John Hines is going to have to make. And quite frankly, like if Arvidsson's coming back in, I don't know where you're putting Tolvanen right now. If you're going to put Arvidsson in the top 6, I don't think they're touching that Granlund line. I don't know where you're putting Tolvanen right now where you feel great about his spot in the lineup. So I do think there's a chance. I think there's a good chance that Tolvanen's not going to be in there tonight. Now, I'll say this. I think at some point for the Predators to win this series, you're going to need him. You're going to need him on the power play. We know how important special teams is in every playoff series. I think it's going to be especially important in this one. Number one, you can't get burned by their power play in Carolina. You're talking about a top 5 unit that's been dangerous all year. But you've got to find a way to be effective on the power play if you're the Predators. You can't have a repeat performance of 2019 in a lot of ways. You can't have the way that series played out in terms of the physicality, obviously, which I don't think the Predators will. But you certainly can't have the way that series turned out in terms of not being able to get anything done on the power play. You've got to find a way for special teams in this series to be a weapon for you, and the Predators have not been able to do that in the playoffs as of late.
Yeah, I mean, look, if they go 0 for 3 and lose on the power play or something tonight and lose, then I think Tolvanen would be back in game 2 if he is indeed out. But another thing we know, based on what John Hines said, he was asked directly in one of his recent pressers about Duchesne, being up there with Johansson and Forsberg, and basically said that's not happening. So it's one of two people. It's Arvidsson in a reunion of that line, or it's Tolvanen, right? I mean, it's one of those two.
Yep.
And if it is Arvidsson, to your point, then your third line, you're talking Haula, Duchesne, Tolvanen, or Haula, Duchesne. Oh, you tell me. Is it Richardson?
I think it would be Richardson.
Has played well.
Yeah.
Richardson over Cousins.
I think it would be. Just based on the way he's played and he's the playoff experience as well. I think they would start with Richardson. Now, I think regardless of how this series turns out, you're going to see a few lineup changes throughout the series. Even if and John Hines talked about this the other day too. Just because you win a game doesn't mean that you've automatically just got to stick with the same lineup. Now, we see coaches do that a lot, and they don't mess with things a lot of times when they work. But I do think with the way they've played as of late, if everybody's not bringing it to the certain level, you could see some lineup changes even if they win games.
Well, to your point about coaches not changing lineups when they work, that lineup with Richardson, Duchesne, and Haula on the third line, even though on paper it doesn't look like it would work, it has worked.
Yeah.
And the Jofa line has worked in the past. So I would lean towards that being the lineup tonight, that you don't touch the Granlund or Hurd line, and then it's Jofa, and then whatever you want to call that third line or the Duchesne, Haula, Richardson line. I don't know if there's a name to it yet. I'm sure Twitter will come up with a name for it.
Do we have to come up with a name for every line?
Yes, you do.
That's something we've got to do
You
here?
Absolutely do. 1,000%.
All right.
Yeah. Well, you have to come up with a name for a line if it's together for a week, right?
There should be a certain requirement of length that you've got to be together. Yes.
Daily names, but I'll before the end of the show, we'll come up with
I really enjoyed the Forsberg, Johansson, Duchesne, dollar bill line that I coined last week, but apparently that's not going to happen.
That is nice. The deuce.
Yes.
Deuce line.
The double deuce.
The double deuce line. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation on the Predators and focus in goal. UC Saros getting his first real playoff experience here. Notice what I did there with the qualifying round series, Rexrode. First real playoff experience heading in, starting tonight in Game 1. How much could this start to define the future of the goaltending position for the Nashville Predators? We'll get into that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode live from the Wholesaling Studios, powered by RumbleOn.com here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in. Hour number 2 of Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Ryan Port there with you on this Monday morning in Nashville, Tennessee, discussing the Nashville Predators taking on the Carolina Hurricanes. Game 1 tonight between the Predators and the Hurricanes. Puck drop at 7 o'clock, pregame at 6 o'clock here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Taking your thoughts all show long on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Frank on the text line says, the Preds just need to stay out of the penalty box, plain and simple. That's the biggest key. 5-on-5, you can hang. Special teams, not so much. Tolvanen will start at home in Game 3. You welcome back the Joe Feline, Richardson in for the 2 road games to start for his experience in the playoffs. So Frank saying the key to the series for the Predators, keeping things 5-on-5 as much as possible because of Carolina's prowess on special teams. They've certainly been great in special teams.
Yeah, no, I mean, no doubt. I mean, they are elite, both units. So stay out of the box for sure. I mean, I think the Preds penalty kill, obviously, has come a long way.
Yes.
If you want to talk about beginning of the year to now, but that's a tough assignment, and you got to get some of your own again, and that's where the biggest case for Tolvanen can be made.
Do you take any stock into the fact that the Preds only gave up 2 power play goals to the Canes all season? That the Canes had a great power play, but the penalty kill for the Preds did find a way to keep them in check.
I mean, yeah, I think you take some stock from it. Now, as we know, that can change in a hurry in the playoffs. But yeah, I think you take some stock from it. I mean, I think the best practice against Carolina and their power play, to Frank's point, is stay out of the box. Like, I think back to that Saturday game where the Predators had to win that one, and they did. Their power play wasn't good, but they only gave Carolina 1 opportunity on the power play. So, to me, that's the best formula. Don't give them a whole lot of time out there to change the game because they've got some guys that can absolutely do it. So, yeah, I mean, I think you take some confidence away from that if you're the Predators on their penalty kill units. And, Joe, to your point, I mean, it's night and day now to what it was to begin the season. I mean, they were so bad on the penalty kill to begin this season that there was really nowhere to go but up, and they've become way more consistent. They've been much better in that area. I still don't know if I would go as far to say it's a huge strength of this team now, but I would say that it's certainly you at least feel comfortable that there's a good chance you're going to kill it off now if you're the Predators on the penalty kill, whereas earlier this season, I mean, it was a total disaster. I mean, it felt like impending doom every time they went out there on the penalty kill.
Right, and obviously, you look at especially Saros, but Rene too. I mean, like goalie numbers, everything was skewed by, especially a couple of those games. But it was a total mess. So it's been pretty good for a while now. Again, you don't necessarily want to test it out, even though you've had a lot of success, as Port said, even against this team. But you feel pretty good about it. And, the power play that's where, I mean, even with Tolvanen, I think it looked maybe as bad as it's looked against these guys in that Saturday night win, right? Like, couldn't get anything going at all.
Yeah.
With Tolvanen, I'd still be hesitant, to feel like I still feel like your best chance is with him. But if it's that big of a difference 5-on-5 with a Richardson, with a Cousins, then I think physicality is at a premium, especially maybe early in this series.
So now the big question heading into this series, if you're the Predators, is can UC Saros keep this up? Obviously, I mean, we've talked about it a ton here on the show. He has been awesome for this team. When you start listing off reasons that the Predators have turned things around, UC Saros is at the top of that list. He's been amazing. He, in my opinion, has put himself in the Vezina Trophy conversation. We'll see what happens on that front. But he's just been outstanding for the Predators. But we've talked about it. The playoffs are a different beast, and it's a different animal coming up for UC Saros and the Predators heading into this series against Carolina. And this is, really the first time that you're heading into a 7-game playoff series with UC Saros being the guy. We saw the qualifying round series last year against Arizona. The Predators lose in 4. And I didn't think Saros was just bad in that series, but you look at the numbers, it's an .895 save percentage, a 3.22 goals against average. That's a far cry from the numbers that we've seen from UC Saros over the course of the last couple of months. I'm interested to see, number one, if he can keep that going with the layoff that we've seen now with UC Saros. It's been over a week since he's played a game at this point. So can he continue to play at the form that he was before the regular season ended? That's the number one question. But number two, how does he kind of handle the moment of this, of being the guy heading into the playoffs for really the first time in his career? This is going to be, I think, a discovery time for UC Saros and the Predators to figure out exactly what they have moving forward here at that position and whether or not he can be the franchise goalie. Like earlier this season, when you and I talked about it, Joe, I felt like he was the bridge guy to the next guy. certainly the way he's played the last couple of months, you feel great about UC Saros moving forward here. Can he be the long-term answer? And I'm talking 7, 8, 9 years. Like, can he be the next guy? I think we're going to begin to start to find out the answer to that beginning in this series against Carolina.
I agree. I mean, there's no outcome here that cements it either way, right? But I mean, David Poyle kind of said it the other day with that too. You know, it basically like it's what you do in the playoffs, and it was I mean it was a question I asked him about Saros, but for something I wrote today, by the way, for the Athletic about Saros, and I think he said it. You know, like this is when you really determine what you are as a player. It's interesting when you look at it like, and it's a way smaller sample size, but it's a decent sample size at this point with Saros. I mean, his career numbers are right there with Pekka Rinne's career numbers. Actually has a better save percentage, but he's nowhere, in the realm because Pekka Rinne has had so many big moments, big games, big series, big wins in the postseason. That's what defines you as a player. And I think that, and you can, if you want to be pessimistic about this, you could say, well, Saros was actually on a tear last year too, which is why he got the job, which is why it was pretty clear he was going to be the starting goalie heading into the bubble in Edmonton. And then, just wasn't good enough. But the difference there, obviously, is 5 months.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to keep the rhythm up. We'll see if he can keep the rhythm after a week. 5 months is kind of tough. And not to make an excuse, you got to be better than he was against Arizona. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with Steve Valiquette, which I'm not even sure how to say his last name, but
not Quet.
Valiquette. Valiquette.
Porth is very adamant about that.
You call him Valley.
I like it.
Well, that's good. I mean, he's not a guy that, he wasn't an especially successful goalie in the league, but he bounced around. He's a coach, but he started this analytics company. And of course, Vingan gave me his number. He told me a lot of really interesting things. And one interesting thing that in his company, they consider slot shots now to be low danger if they're clear view. Basically, just like the position keeps advancing at an incredible rate. But, Saros, so the goals he gave up last year against Arizona, he gave up roughly a low danger one a game, which, and again, not just total garbage goals, but just kind of got to get that one.
Yeah.
And if you say that too often about a goalie in the playoffs, that goalie's going to lose. That team's going to lose, and it's the low danger shots that really separate goalies, which is interesting too. Like the super difficult, it's pretty consistent for NHL guys, like 1 and 3. It's the guy that consistently keep out the soft or whatever sort of softish, kind of stuff that you'd like to see him stop. The guys that can consistently keep those out are the elite ones, and he's been the best goalie in this league for 2 months plus now.
So what you're saying is that Tristan Jarry is not one of the elite ones.
No.
After what happened yesterday in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, Tristan Jarry, he's got some work to do.
Yeah, that was a toughie. That was not ideal. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Got some work to do on that. Well, I mean, Joe, I think back to the last time we saw UC Saros play, as good as the Predators played in that game, and I think as great as you feel about that, if you're a Predators fan, there were 2 or 3 times in that game where Saros just had to make unbelievable saves. Carolina is that good. They're going to find ways to get these high danger opportunities. They're going to find ways to get their odd man rushes. You're going to have to deal with that at some point if you're the Predators. And the bottom line is this: Saros, if the Predators are going to win this series, Saros is probably going to have to steal a game or two. And he's going to have to, in every game, make some saves that you probably don't expect your goaltender to make. And he's done that for 2 months now. That's been a nightly occurrence with him at this point. So maybe you've gotten to the point with UC Saros that you do expect it at this point. But I think that's going to be the level he's going to have to play at if the Predators are going to win. Now, Could UC Soros put up, good numbers in this series and the Predators still lose? I think absolutely he could. I think, if UC Soros is floating around a 920, 925 save percentage in this series, those are pretty good numbers. I still think the Predators could end up losing the series if that's the case. So I hesitate to say it's all whether or not the Predators win this series about how you feel about UC Soros in the playoffs moving forward. But I do think just based on the way Carolina plays and the way that Soros has had to play the last couple of months, it's going to take the same level of play that we've seen for the Predators to win this series. I fully believe that heading into this matchup.
Look at the goal they had in that game. The one goal they had, it was just a tic-tac-toe. I think it was an odd man rush, and no chance.
Yeah,
they're gonna score. He's not gonna shut them out. I mean, it's not realistic. The Preds could give up. He could have a not very great goals against in this series and play great.
Yeah.
That's certainly possible. So there's more to it, but you got to keep out the stuff you should save. If you give up any like that, I think you're in big trouble. And at times he is going to have to rise up and make some of those saves, like you said. He had a couple of them in that game that were absolutely huge. There's a lot of pressure on him. There's no doubt about that. And we just haven't seen enough. I mean, we've never seen him in a hostile environment as a starting goaltender in the playoffs. So this is the first look at that tonight.
When we come back, we'll continue the conversation on UC Soros, taking your thoughts on our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025, including one area where maybe he's been a little subpar this season. That coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 1025 The Game. ESPN 94.9 is the home for Nashville Sounds baseball. Tomorrow, the Sounds open a 6-game homestand at First Horizon Park against the Gwinnett Stripers, the AAA affiliate of the Atlanta Braves. Nashville Sounds baseball on ESPN 94.9, presented by Farm Bureau Health Plans and by 312 Pizza Company. Ryan Porth, you enjoyed a little Nashville Sounds baseball action this weekend.
I did. Saturday night.
A little Christian Yelich in town. It was fun stuff.
It was fun stuff. He made a nice running catch, and he walked a couple of times. It was good to see Yelly at First Horizon.
Yelly. You going to get you a Christian Yelich Nashville Sounds baseball jersey?
No. Probably not. I don't know how many of those they're going to make.
I don't know. Look.
There were a lot of Yelich Brewers jerseys in the crowd.
Hey, anytime you can get an MLB superstar in the park, that's a good thing. So it looked like a fun environment with the Nashville Sounds this weekend.
If you can name a line in one day, you can get a Christian Yelich jersey after one game.
That is true. You're absolutely right. Porth's got a confused look on his face right now. He doesn't know what you're talking about. We just had a conversation about this 2 segments ago. Naming the lines, the forward lines for the Nashville Predators.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yeah, there we go. All right. He's back up there, back up to speed. Right now, talking Predators, taking your thoughts on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025, discussing UC Saros and the pressure that he faces heading into this series. And, Joe, you come out with a piece, as you mentioned, on theathletic.com, kind of breaking down what we've seen from Saros and the opportunity that lays ahead, including in conversation with Brian Boucher here, obviously, who is an analyst for NBC Sports, was on the call last night for Tampa Bay in Florida as well. Without giving your entire article away here, what were some of the takeaways that you had with that conversation with Brian Boucher?
Yeah, and Valiquette, not Valiquette, Steve
yes.
Valiquette. God dang it. QU, come on, QU. Yeah, interesting stuff. With Boucher, he's an interesting case too because, and I was actually going to get into this, but I didn't as much. But Boucher was fine. I mean, he had some really good moments in his career. He wasn't like a star goalie. He had some runs. He had like this really long shutout streak at one point, where he was absolutely on fire. And he talked a little bit about that, how like once you're on that wave, man, who knows how long it'll last. You go with it. And sort of the idea of, okay, could Saros be a Binnington case right now? Now, Binnington was a rookie. Everybody knows the story. Blues were in last place at the beginning of January. They win the cup. He plays out of his mind. He hasn't been that good since. He's still been pretty good. I mean, he's the guy. I think, frankly, he's going to steal this series and shock the world because call your shot is about calling shots, not making wimpy predictions.
That's
like
right.
Porth does. But
wow.
Regardless, I'm sorry. That was unnecessary. But it's interesting to think about Binnington. Think about the idea of, are you on a wave here, or is Saros this guy? Who knows? I mean, is Saros going to be an elite goaltender in this league in the years to come? If that's the case, the Preds might want to pay him more money here as he comes up on his deal as a restricted free agent. And they will. But I mean, if he has a great payoff, that could change that now too, by the way. But he talked just about even the rhythm thing too. I mean, it is possible that this week plus off could mess up Saros a little bit. I mean, it's possible, but the Preds will take the rest, I think, for sure. And then with Valiquette, there's just a lot of stuff about goaltending that I found interesting. And the one thing about Saros that has not been great this year, I mean, so Valiquette, they break down every single shot in the league. He's got several teams as clients, but they break down every shot from the goaltender perspective and the shooter perspective. And, they're trying to show shooters like, see, an interesting thing too, and this may not be a revelation to people, if you have a bunch of weak outside shots in a game, the goaltender you're facing is more likely to handle the high danger stuff because you've warmed that goaltender up. The idea of don't waste your shots. Some people are like, yeah, shoot the puck, put it on net. Like, well, if you look at the data, it tells you that if that's your strategy, a lot of times you're going to actually face a goaltender who plays better. But the one thing Saros has not done great is on screen shots. He is above expected, according to Veliket's data, on screen shots. Shouldn't be shocking. I mean, that's, I think, where the height thing can be an issue, right, relative to other goalies. But every other way you can look at a shot, and they've got broken plays. And I mean, I've looked at he's shared, like, the way he breaks it down. I mean, every possible thing you can think of, odd man rushes, broken plays, open, unscreened here, there, everywhere. I mean, any kind of shot you can imagine, they have it broken down. It's the screened shots where Saros is actually subpar. And, if you're Carolina, no surprise. They're gonna do everything they can to try to get those kind of shots.
They are, and if you're the Predators, you've got to take a similar approach to what happened against you in Dallas in 2019. Is you just don't let them get to the middle. I mean, that's easier said than done, and obviously Carolina's got some guys that can do that pretty well, even though they're not the biggest team. But if you're the Predators, you've got to find a way, especially on the power play, to make sure Saros can see the puck. When he sees it, he's going to give yourself a chance. I mean, the way that he's played and just how quick he's been laterally with his movement, he's going to have a chance on every shot for the most part if you give him a chance to see the puck. But, I mean, I think back to, the early season struggles on the penalty kill. A lot of those goals were deflections against. And, it's difficult for any goaltender in the league. I mean, we saw it in the Washington-Boston series over the weekend. Oshie lets one go from the point, and Dowd sitting there in front redirects it, and all of a sudden the game's over. Washington's won game one. And you're talking about Tuukka Rask, who's been awesome for Boston the last decade there in goal. So it's been it's a problem for every goaltender. But I do think, to your point, that's when maybe the height starts to come into play, because Saros is trying to push across, and all of a sudden the puck goes the other way, and there's just not enough room for error in terms of recovery there. Like if Pekka is in net in his prime, there have been times where the puck's been redirected, and it just hits him. Like he doesn't see it. It just hits him because he's huge in net. You don't have that luxury with UC Saros.
Yeah, exactly. Now, as far as if you break down his game specifically, the East-West, and John Hines has done it on our show. I mean, his footwork in the crease, his anticipation, is elite. His reading of plays is elite. His East-West movement is, it's got to be great. It's got to be great to make up for those couple inches that you don't have that other goaltenders do. So, and Hines, has talked about, if there's a change this year too, it's also just the mental focus of getting ready for each game and being prepared as a starting goaltender, which he has not had to do for a whole year and still hasn't. I mean, that'll be next year, 82 games, but in this condensed schedule, grueling as it was, he brought it every night. So look, it's all, it all bodes well. It's just, look, it's the pressure that starts tonight is just different than anything else. The intensity is different than anything else. This is why we love watching. I couldn't possibly, I would watch twice as much playoff hockey as I already have if possible. It's so good. That also makes it so difficult, I think, on goaltenders, to rise up and play their best. So it's going to be very illuminating when it comes to UC Saros here in the next few days.
When we come back, we'll be joined by Predators president and CEO Sean Henry. We'll look ahead to the matchup against Carolina with him. Also, some news on the attendance front as well, with the Predators in games 3 and 4 and home, and potentially in game 6 as well. All that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game.
This hour of Robby and Rexrode is brought to you by Train. Get a great deal this spring on a new Train heating and cooling system. At Train, they test so it runs. Visit traininfo.com to find your local dealer and learn more. It's hard to stop a train.
Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Ryan Porth here with you on this Monday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. Streaming live on Periscope, YouTube, and on Twitch as well. Talking Nashville Predators, Game 1 of the series tonight against Carolina taking place. And to help us talk about that and much more, we go to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and welcome in the venerable, the legendary Predators president and CEO, Sean Henry. Sean, what's going on, man? How we doing?
Well, good morning, guys. Before we start, though, I got to give a shout-out to what will become the final carpool of my daughter's elementary school career. They're all listening in to you, and we got Jesse, George, J.D., and Michael. But the special one goes out to George, who's the star of Grassland baseball yesterday, with 2 3-run dingers to propel them just 3 wins away from the championship.
Very nice. Nicely done, George. Coming up in the clutch. We appreciate you listening, and congratulations on that wonderful performance. Sean, obviously.
Now I'm back.
There we go. That's how you set the tone.
Good luck in your finals today.
That's exactly right. That's how you set the tone on the interview. So, Sean, we'll get to the series itself coming up here in just a minute, but I want to get your thoughts on just the way this team closed out the season. I mean, halfway through the season, things weren't going well. I mean, you were frustrated. David Poyle was frustrated. You guys were very vocal about your thoughts at that point. And to watch the transformation that's happened since then has been pretty incredible from our standpoint. What's it been like for you guys in the organization to watch this turnaround and to watch this team play the way they did to earn a playoff berth?
Well, it's a combination of emotions, right? It's obviously fun for all of us, but it's also pretty rewarding because, the team the past 25, 30 games is or was playing the way we kind of expected, the team to come together, and it's nice to see that happen. But you're right, back, first 2 months or so of the season, everyone was frustrated. You guys were, our fans were, obviously our players, coaches were, we all were, and it's really nice to see the team healthy, everyone, back on the ice, and, playing the way we thought they could. It's been really great. And at the beginning of the year, we always talked about our goalie tandem being the force behind the team and where we could land ourselves. And I think you've seen that. Went on that long road trip. Saros was hurt, and Pekka went in there and really put us in this position we're in right now. And then when Saros came back, he's just been on fire. So it really is good to see all the pieces that you put together coming to life the way you thought they could or should. And it's a lot more fun this way than the other way, no doubt about that.
Sean, from a business perspective, how big is it to get into the playoffs, to now have bigger crowds, and what can you tell us just about the past 14 months, the challenges, and where you guys are now from that perspective?
Yeah, and I appreciate all the conversation, you guys have provided us over the past 14 months because, past 14 months has not been good for anybody. I don't care what you do for a living, and obviously a lot of people have suffered a lot more than just financial losses. It's been the worst year of our lives, and I hope it will be the worst year of our lives for the rest of them. But from a financial standpoint, we're really fortunate. We built something big, something special. We have an incredible ownership group that stood behind every one of our employees, and we had players that went out and made a difference in the community every day, from the morning after the tornadoes to the morning after the bombings and everything in between. So when you look at the P&L for this year, it's not something I hope we ever see again. It was a bloodbath for everybody. But again, we built something that we always said if we do things right, we could be a team that can compete with anyone at any level on any measurement. And I think that's where we are right now. We put ourselves, in the top 10, 12 in the league in virtually every single category, from revenue standpoints to, impressions to ratings and all those good things. So it's important to make the playoffs every year, because to achieve your ultimate goal, you have to be in the real season to move forward and get closer to raising the cup. So that's why making the playoffs is important. From a straight P&L, dollars and cents standpoint, nothing's normal this year. Of course, it's good to have 12,000 people rather than 5,000 or zero. But it's not going to make a huge dent or impact in this year's financials. What it will make is that legacy embrace, that legacy memory. 4, 5, 6, 8 years from now, you're going to have 50,000 people claim to be one of the 12,135 to be there when X happened, or this is how the series ended, and that's why it's so important. I think, let's face it, streaks are important. When the Red Wings were in the playoffs, 25, 26 straight years. And, the first 6, 7, 8, 9 years of that run, they were knocked out in the first, second, third round virtually every year. And then obviously they caught magic and went on that dynasty run. So this is our 7th year in the postseason, making us second most in the league, tied with Washington behind Pittsburgh. You put yourself in the position of the playoffs every year, and eventually the ultimate goal will follow.
Predators president and CEO Sean Henry on the line with us, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. And, Sean, I think back to the first game of the year against Columbus, just being in the building, and it's just silent. I mean, nothing is in there. It was so weird to watch. And then you fast forward to the scene we saw with Pekka in the last game and just the ovation that happened. I mean, it's just night and day, the difference there. So what did you think of just that contrast coming down the stretch, and what can fans expect now that the playoffs are about to be underway with games 3 and 4, potentially game 6 coming up at home in this series as well?
You nailed that spectrum pretty well. What a bizarre, beginning and end, with virtually no fans in the building, piped in noise and music that was awkward at best, to, the Saturday we clinched to Pekka's, such fun game on the last regular season game of the year, where, I think we had 6,000 people in the building for those 2 games. It sounded like 30,000. And Rob Brindamore talked about how intimidating the crowd was, and he said they only had 5,000, 6,000. So it really was such a swing in emotions. And that's what makes for great memories, too. Not many people talk about how special it was, when the Yankees tore up 110 wins, or the Dolphins won, 15 straight, that year. You talk about the years with the ups and the downs, when the wild card team goes all the way to the Super Bowl, as the Giants have done twice, by the way,
Nice.
Or when a 16 beats a 1, like we did against the Blackhawks back in 17. It's those emotional roller coasters that make for memorable seasons that you just get excited about. And let's face it, our 12,000 people will be in the building Friday and Sunday will sound like 50,000. And that's fun when the opposing coach and players are talking about your crowd.
Well, you brought up 2017, John. There's been a lot of discussion about that. Does this remind you of that at all?
It does a little bit. Obviously, if the right thing happens and we find ourselves playing in the finals, then it really will. But a very similar year, during the regular season, beginning of it at least, or we were on that huge bad stretch from late November to early January, and we were out of the playoffs, and there was a lot of frustrations in and around the team. But, we believed in the team and didn't make moves at the trade deadline because we really thought we had a special group. And as the team got a little bit more healthy and you start in the playoffs, really anything can happen. So you always hold back to those. It's hard not to compare the two situations. Hopefully, at the end of this first round, we're comparing it even more strongly. But if the wrong thing happens and it doesn't, I think the similarities start and end with, a year that you thought you could have done more in the regular season, but somehow you started playing great hockey, going into the playoffs. So I really do hope it's very, very similar, with the difference being just 2 more wins in the playoffs as opposed to a dissimilar end.
Sean, last thing for you here. As you look at this series, as you look at the way the team has played, the identity that the team has heading into this matchup, how much credit does John Hynes deserve for what we've seen and the turnaround that we've seen with this group, where you feel like this team really has an identity that they've stuck with and that they're going to try to play with heading into this series?
Well, it's something that he and the coaches have talked about, since, pre-camp, back in October, November, and, when David put this type of team together, that this is who we're going to be. We're going to be really, really hard to play against with a lot of skilled players and a good mixture of some youth and some veterans. And you have to give him and the coaches all the credit in the world for putting these guys in the right positions. Everyone's on the bus, and it's his job to find the right seat for everybody. And sometimes that doesn't happen as fast as we all want, and really hard to see that happen quickly in a really odd training camp for all of us, and then with all the injuries that we've had. But once things started getting a little bit more stable, where guys were, come back in the lineup a little bit more slowly, I think it made his job not easier, but a little bit more focused on one-on-ones, where each guy coming back in, we're taking on a role to build on that identity that you talked about. And now, that's who we are. We're hard to play against. And again, the last 25, 30 games of the season were just so much fun to watch. I was at the Little League fields quite a bit yesterday, it was fun talking to people that aren't the most passionate fans, but enjoy sports, talking about how much fun this team is to watch. And they're right. The team is a lot of fun. And they're even more fun when the guys are raising their sticks in the air at the end of the game.
Absolutely. And it's going to be fun once again starting tonight for the Predators, Game 1, taking on the Carolina Hurricanes. Predators president and CEO Sean Henry has been our guest here on Robby and Rexrode. Sean, really appreciate you taking time to join us this morning and enjoy the playoffs starting tonight. Appreciate you, man.
Well, I hope we do. I hope you guys enjoy the playoffs too. And I just want to thank the fans for being so accepting and tolerant from all the policies and protocols we're doing, because they're the reason, their adherence to what we're doing, that we can have one of the largest crowds in the NHL for the playoffs. So I appreciate them. And I'm calling you guys Wednesday morning at 7:30 because you guys know I'm superstitious.
That's right.
And if the right thing happens tonight, we're waking up together every game day. So make sure you're available Sunday morning too.
Hey, we're all here for that. That's fine. Sean Henry, our guest here on Robby and Rexrode, Predators president and CEO. And I tell you, Joe, it's going to be a really cool environment. When Game 3 rolls around, obviously we're looking forward to the games tonight in Carolina and in Game 2 as well. But about 12,000 people going to be in the building on Friday and then on Sunday as well. Compared to what we started with this year, that's going to be a heck of an environment coming up in Game 3 starting on Friday.
Yeah, and look, the environment already that the 5,700 to 7,000 range has created.
Yeah.
Like the noise, everything, well beyond what I would have. Oh, to me, I think it's probably going to feel very much like a normal full crowd. It won't quite be there, but it should be pretty special.
When we come back, it is time for the Rex Rant. Joe Rexrode has his rant coming up next. You're not going to want to miss it. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game.
The time is now for the Rex Rant
Sounds like somebody's got a case of the Mondays.
on Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game and the Game Nashville app.
Yes, time for the Rex Rant. We do this each Monday at 7:45. The Rex Rant takes place. Joe Rexrode, as always, we've got some beautiful music to lead you into your rant today.
That's a very good choice. That always, man, brings me back to high school, getting ready to go to school. Miserable.
Little bit of Kokomo in here today. I don't know why you don't like this song. I think it's great.
Well, I told you. I mean, look, it's pretty bad. But I only hate it because the man. I wish I could remember what station it was exactly. But in high school, you turn it on in the morning. It was like the popular music station. And they would play that song at Bobby McFerrin's "Don't Worry, Be Happy," I swear, every morning. And then finally, I'm like, why do I keep turning this on? Because it's making me angry before I go to school.
Well, I can see if they're doing it every morning, you develop a certain hatred to the song. So what is today's edition of the Rex Rant, Joe Rexrode? What are you fired up about today?
Well, first of all, so, Porth, do you have the audio to play?
Yes, I do.
Oh, yeah.
Do you want me to play it now?
Thank you.
Are we doing it now?
Yes.
Okay, so here's the audio that has Joe Rexrode just fired up today. Ryan Porth, go right ahead.
How much do you worry about the idea of a young player that's used to playing a lot being perhaps left out of the lineup and maybe that leading to some resentment?
So that was our good friend Jared Stillman the other day on the press conference with the Predators. Why does that have you fired up, Joe?
Okay. Listen, you knew that if at some point it was going to come around to me picking on Jared.
I'm really surprised it took this long.
Been trying to hold on. Yeah. But listen, I'm not just picking on Jared here, okay? This is also me picking on one of my least favorite fan concerns in sports, okay? And I'm glad that Jared used the word resent because it's so dumb. The idea that a coach sitting a player is going to cause that player to like resent the team or organization, or I guess like not give full effort as a result, or or that it will somehow damage the relationship. I mean, I like think about that. Like this is pro sports. These are professional athletes. They get cut all the time. They get traded. They gain money or they lose money based on performance, but to a lesser extent, but to some extent on their professionalism and their willingness to participate in the team environment. That's pro sports. There's no transfer portal here, okay? Now, if you're a college coach and in today's atmosphere, you probably need to think a little bit about playing time, depth chart, certain players, they're young, 18 to 22, how they're going to react to news they don't like. You got to keep your backup quarterback. Like you think about stuff like that, okay? But that's a different world. This world is professional athletics. So, like if John Hines or David Poyle gave even like more than a passing thought to like some kind of relationship damage because Tolvin or anyone else would react, how they'd react to not being allowed, I'd be shocked. I'd be shocked if it was more than a half second. If anyone in that position, coach or GM in pro sports, makes a lineup decision based on that, then they should not hold those positions. They should not be a coach anymore or a GM anymore. You want to be in the lineup? Then play better. Earn your way into lineup. And listen, specifically on Tolvanen, I'm not sure I'd sit him tonight because I want the threat he brings to the power play. But if he does sit, his reaction should be excitement to earn his way back. Resentment means go somewhere else. There's absolutely no room for it, and there should be no consideration given to it. That's all I've got.
Well, and I think also, too, when it comes to this conversation, like it's one thing with guys that have been there a while, too. Like if you're sitting down Joe Thornton or somebody like that that's been in the league for 15 years, that's one thing. Like, quite frankly, Eeli Tolvanen, Dante Fabro, if they're not in the lineup, they don't have enough skins on the wall to have resentment. I mean, what have they done at this level that gives them this holier than thou attitude. And look, I don't think Tolvanen feels that way. I don't think Fabro would feel that way. Would they be upset to not be in the lineup? Sure. You want that as a competitor. You don't want anybody that's just happy with being out of the lineup. So there's a difference there between being upset, maybe even being mad, but not being resentful about it. Angry's fine. I would expect that you would be angry if you're not playing. But this idea that all of a sudden that's just going to long-term just totally damage your relationship, that does happen a lot in terms of the fans and the way they think about that. And I just don't understand it. If you're that soft, pro sports is probably not the place for you. Like it's probably not going to be a career path that works out very well for you at that point.
I mean, and Jared used his question on that. There are a lot of different ways he could have gone, but he used his question on that. And also, by the way, his Wi-Fi was crappy and he was all breaking up. Now I can't say anything because my Wi-Fi is crappy today, so I have to.
Was that going to be the secondary part of your rant about his Wi-Fi, and you just had to scrap it?
I was going to lean in a little bit on that. We had a little. Of course, I immediately tweet shamed him about his Wi-Fi instantly, obviously at the time too. But yeah, I can't talk about that today. So stick with the resentment. It's just to me, it's insulting that you would think about that. Like if you're one of those guys who is trying to win at this level, that you would. I mean, again, and if you're worried about that, man, then you don't want him in your organization anyway. And I don't think that's the case. And he better, if this is what happens tonight, then he better respond. Now, we didn't see practice yesterday, in Carolina. I mean, I'm sure that John Hines is keeping it open here, like, show me something, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason these practices, you can use them for that. But if he isn't, then I expect him to respond as well as you would hope, and probably be in the lineup at some point.
Let's go to our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Got a texter that says, Joe, Jared's question is actually next level. You just said that the fans are concerned with this, so Jared is voicing the question from the fan perspective. He already knows the answer. So what do you think about that, Jared's question there being next level?
It's certainly on some level. There's no I don't know what you call that level, but it's quite a level. It's I think it's Preds Facebook level.
Oh wow! I don't know if I'd go that far.
Pecorine better be starting tonight.
Wow.
Is Pecorine going to be mad if he doesn't start tonight? He might be.
Is he going to be resentful, do you think?
I think so. We know how Pekka gets.
That's the word that comes to mind when I think of Pecorine. We're just full of resent, that guy.
Big grudge holder, that Pecorine,
That is today's edition of the Rex Rant. You can check it out each Monday at 7:45 here on Robby and Rexrode. I still do wonder if you were just going to go off about Jared's Wi-Fi connection, and then the last segment just made you scrap that. Was that a part of your plan originally?
If anybody who's closely watching our show, bless your heart if you are, you will notice that I've had a locale change.
There's a scenery change.
Yeah. So, unfortunately, my face is now closer to the screen, so I'm filling more of the screen with my face. So I apologize for that.
It sounds a lot better this segment, Joe.
It does. You sound great.
Well, good. So we've sacrificed the aesthetics with me right here for some better sound.
That's right. That's what we do here on the program, all for the betterment of the team. When we come back, we'll be joined by Corey Curtis from News 2. We'll get his thoughts on the Predators in this series against Carolina. Also, some Titans minicamp over the weekend as well. All that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode, live from the Wholesaling Studios, powered by RumbleOn.com. Here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in. Hour number 3 of Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Ryan Porth here with you on this Monday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. The Predators taking on the Carolina Hurricanes tonight in Game 1 of the Stanley Cup playoffs. And we've got some tickets to give away for Game 3 of the Stanley Cup playoffs in this series for the Predators against Carolina coming up on Friday. We'll have tickets to give away every day at 8 o'clock this week for the playoffs, so make sure you're tuned in for that. Ryan Porth, you have a trivia question for the tickets today that our listeners can text in 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. The first person to answer the trivia question correctly will win a pair of tickets for Game 3 of the Predators against Carolina. What is today's trivia question?
So it was 10 years ago when the Nashville Predators moved on beyond the first round for the first time in franchise history with a Game 6 victory at home against the Anaheim Ducks. Who scored the game-winning goal in Game 6 of the 2011 series between the Preds and the Ducks?
If you know the answer to that question, text in at 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025, and you'll win a pair of tickets to see the Predators and Hurricanes in Game 3 coming up on Friday. With that in mind, let's go to our 1025 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and welcome in our good friend Corey Curtis from News 2. Corey, what's going on, my man? How we doing?
Just getting ready to get another one cranked up, guys. Let's go.
Absolutely. So what do you think of this matchup here for the Predators against Carolina getting underway tonight? Game 1 at 7 o'clock tonight, pregame at 6 o'clock here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. What do you expect to see out of this Predators group tonight as they begin their playoff run here?
Well, I think, the drum I've been beating on here for the last month or so is I expect more of the same. Because, this isn't a hot team. This is the way this team plays now. And so they're going to continue to play this way. They're going to forecheck hard. They're going to be physical. This is a team they need to be physical with. And they're going to try to play this game in a phone booth, which is what they need to try to do and rely on a hot goaltender. Is it going to be enough over 7 games? That's going to be really hard. It would be really hard for any team in the National Hockey League to get by Carolina. That's why when people say, well, if they don't get past the first round, this was a failure. That's ridiculous. Look, if they don't play well, it's a failure. But they can play well and lose. Carolina can play well and lose. It's possible. It's possible. They're playing well at the right time, and I think that's the most exciting thing. And I look forward to a really physical series and for them to get up in the face of Carolina and challenge them. I don't know if it'll be enough. I doubt it will be enough at this point. But I expect it to be extremely competitive. And what we've seen so far in the playoffs is extremely competitive, and I think it'll be more of the same.
So, Corey, we've talked a lot about UC Saros today. As you said, the hot goaltender, he's a key figure in this series. How much of an impact do you think this series, this postseason, has on his future with this organization? And where are you right now on Saros as – as a Saros era here beginning as the Pecorine era comes to a close?
Well, I think it's important because, just like with, quarterbacks in the NFL, when you win in the playoffs, that's when you make your legacy. When you win the playoffs in hockey, that's when he gets a chance to really make his legacy. We've seen really good hockey from UC Saros. We've seen really mediocre hockey in his career from UC Saros. He's notoriously been a slow starter and a much better, finisher, much better second half guy. But it is important how you get it done in the postseason. So I think it's important. Look, do I think that he's the goalie 5 years from now? Probably not. They've got that guy probably in the system. But, it locks down that bridge until that time gets here, that's for sure.
Corey Curtis from News 2 on the line with us, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Corey, obviously, you look at the production versus what they've been paid, and it's just not been a good string of hockey in terms of what we've seen on the ice from Duchesne and Johansson and the production in the last couple of years. How much pressure is on those guys heading into this playoff run, and how much do you think with a good playoff run, those two specifically can change the narrative that a lot of Predators fans have on them at this point?
Well, I mean, I think, for Johansson, he's a guy who's been up and down. And I think it would be perceived as more up and down. That's great. What are we going to get from him next year? I think that will still be the perception. With Duchesne, he's got to make good because he really hasn't produced a lot since he's been here. I think he's played relatively hard, but the numbers obviously haven't been here. And I don't know if you heard his comments after the last game, but I thought it was really interesting when he was talking about the style of play and how making the transition wasn't easy for everybody. And I don't know if he was talking about himself or not.
Yeah.
But it kind of seemed like it was. And, maybe he has finally accepted, the things he's got to do to be not just a guy who's playing hard, a guy who looks fast, but a guy who's producing on this hockey team. I'm not going to go overreact to 2 goals in the last game. Yes, it was great he got him, and maybe, that starts to crack the ice a little bit for him to break through. But more than that, maybe it tells him, hey, if I do listen to the coach, I am going to produce. And so I think, look, I think this postseason is vitally important to Matt Duchene's future with this hockey team. And it might be for Johansson as well.
So would you play or sit Ellie Tolvanen if you were John Hines today, Corey?
Stillman asked me that on Friday. He gave me choices, though. He said, what was it, Tolvanen, Cousins, Richardson, and I think he gave me one more.
Grimaldi?
Grimaldi, and it was Grimaldi, yeah. And you know what? If you're a coach, it's nice to have choices, and that's why you get paid the big dollars. To me, it's really difficult. It's really difficult because – he did mean so much to you for a stretch of the season, but he hasn't played great since coming back from the injury. And you know what kind of series this is going to be. And I might be leaning on Cousins at this point for that physicality, especially setting the tone on the road in Game 1. Now, the psyche of the player is important. You have to know your guys, and you have to know what they can handle and what they can't handle. So I can't go into that because I don't know those guys well enough. But I'm thinking right now I'd rather have the physicality at this point. I could be wrong, but that's where I'm leaning.
So, Corey, obviously the predictions have come out over the weekend, and whether you look on ESPN or The Athletic or NHL.com, Carolina an overwhelming favorite in this series when it comes to the predictions. What do you think of that? Do you think there's any level of disrespect? Some Predators fans have thrown that out there. And what do you think happens in this series for the Predators against the Hurricanes?
Look, when a team is the 1 seed, they're supposed to win, right?
Yep.
So if you're picking against the 1 seed, then you're disrespecting them. When you're picking against the 4 seed against the 1 seed, that's not disrespecting them, okay? And I know everybody loves to play the disrespect card, but the Predators are the last team in. And the Hurricanes have been tremendous all year. I think ESPN was, 16 for 16?
Yep.
On Carolina? I'll go 17 for 17. I predict the series to go 7, and I think it's going to be really competitive and entertaining and hard-fought. But, when you're good from start to finish, like Carolina was, you're just really good. And picking against them is a lot more disrespectful than picking against the Predators.
I would tend to agree. Any of these other series, Corey? I mean, I thought it's already been an amazing run here. I mean, the Tampa Bay Florida game last night was incredible. Anything else strike you as an upset pick?
Well, what about Minnesota knocking off Vegas in Game 1?
Yeah,
I mean,
huge.
And shutting them out. I mean, that was quite the game. I mean, and quite the effort by the Wild, who, by the way, have had a sneaky, really good year. I mean, we have had a lot of teams step up and be really good this year. I mean, there are some divisions that are just, filthy at the top, not just the Central, and not just one team, but 3 and 4 teams in some of them. And for Minnesota to go and knock off in Game 1, I don't know if they're going to be able to finish the deal or not, but, that sends a message to Vegas that, we had an awesome year. Would they finish second in the President's Trophy? But it's not going to be easy to get through the Wild, who had a really good year as well.
A lot of former Predators on that Wild team, too. I mean, you had Fiala, Suter, Hartman, Bonino flying around out there yesterday. Lots of fun to watch on that Wild team for sure. Corey Curtis from News 2 has been our guest here on Robby and Rexrode. Joins us every Monday at 8 o'clock. Corey, great stuff, man. Appreciate you taking time to join us.
All right, guys. Enjoy the playoffs. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Playoffs beginning tonight. Game 1 for the Predators against the Carolina Hurricanes. And we have our trivia question results now. Port, do we have a winner on the trivia question, which was the Predators 10 years ago won their first playoff series against the Anaheim Ducks. Who had the game-winning goal in Game 6 of that series against the Ducks? Do we have a winner?
Jim from Smyrna correctly identified Nick Spaulding as the one who was credited with the game-winning goal. If you think back to it, the goal itself wasn't all that memorable. I think it was a deflection goal that put the Preds on top 3-2 in the third period. And then David Legwand. We got a lot of guesses for Legwand.
Yep.
He's the one who
did score in that game.
Cinched it with the empty net goal in the final seconds. But Jim from Smyrna is going to Game 3.
You talk about one of the cool environments in the history of Bridgestone Arena. Winning that first series, I mean, there were people in the stands just crying, sobbing their eyes out there when they won that first series. That was quite the memorable night. So congratulations to Jim in Smyrna. You'll be going to Game 3 of the Predators and Carolina series coming up on Friday, and we'll have some tickets to give away every day this week at 8 o'clock. When we come back, some Titans news over the weekend, some minicamp that has been underway with the rookies. We'll react to that coming up next. Joe Rexrode was there and was in person. All that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Monday, Smashville, the game, Nashville, and Dos Equis is bringing the party to you. Text the word GOLDEN to 615-737-1025. That's GOLDEN to 615-737-1025 to qualify for the ultimate in-home watch party. And did I mention one lucky fan is getting tickets to a playoff game at Bridgestone Arena? Get a dose, Smashville. You must be 21 or older to enter and win. Enjoy Dos Equis responsibly. Welcome back in. Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Ryan Port there with you on this Monday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. And Joe, over the weekend, some rookie camp activity for the Tennessee Titans. Obviously no Caleb Farley on the field. Elijah Molden not out there either, but you were there. You were in person. What stood out to you over the weekend at Titans rookie camp there at St. Thomas Sports Park?
So much.
Did it?
I've got the entire 2021 season pegged now.
I mean, between that and the schedule coming out the other day, you know exactly what's going to happen. 12-5.
That's right. That's right. Oh man, exactly. So no Molden and Vrabel did, to Vrabel's credit, Vrabel hates injury stuff, and basically said that if it were a game week, he would have been limited in practice. So he's got some minor injury. No one expected Caleb Farley to be out there. I mean, he's rehabbing his back, so that was no surprise. I was curious, Rashad Weaver, will he be out there or not? I mean, you would have expected so, but it's nothing's for certain, and he was out there. And then Mike Vrabel, talked about that afterward and said what you would have expected him to say, that they're letting it play out and all that stuff. And he referred to the statement on the question of, good question by Luke Worsham on the question of whether they knew or not. It's a question worth asking. Anything that stood out to me on the field, I will say that I spent some time watching the two rookie receivers, and I like what I see from Dez Fitzpatrick. He looks pretty smooth out there, very good size. I tweeted this the other day. I continue to be, I think with Dez Fitzpatrick, I got to think that with his interviews with teams, he blew teams away. Because the thing about him is, you can tell when someone's like a football junkie.
Yeah.
Which is what A.J. Brown is, by the way. I mean, which is what Kevin Byard is. And A.J. Brown, to me, his story reminds me of Kevin Byard a little bit because he is into finding every little edge he can find, and it absolutely matters. It's not just being fast, strong, tough. You're a technician when you're playing that position or any position, and so if you are into the craft, you will be better for it. And I get that sense from Dez Fitzpatrick too. You add up the conversations we've had with him, what I've seen in the field, the production we know from him, and I think there's some reason to be optimistic about what he could be for this franchise, long term, but even this year as a rookie. I mean, he just seems like a guy who's gonna get the most out of what he can give, and certainly there's opportunity for him in this offense. Also, Racey McMath is huge.
I saw that.
That's another takeaway, and I threw up a video from practice. He is big and fast. I mean, obviously we know he runs that well, but you're talking just about 220, and he's wearing 81. It wasn't Jonnu Smith, but I was like, that doesn't look like just like a receiver taking 81. It's almost like a hybrid receiver tight end. So that was, and I thought it's drills. He's running some routes, catching some passes from Brady White. It was also too bad the other day. So Brady White, Memphis quarterback, one of the guys who got a tryout, Kalijah Lipscomb from Vanderbilt, also one of those guys. But unfortunately, it looked like maybe a hammy, something like that. They were trying to work it out, and he really couldn't do that much, which is too bad because very good college player, and not really a chance to show what he's got. So, but look, very limited. They did a little bit of team stuff, and there isn't much to take out of these things, at least from the outsider who's in there for 40 minutes perspective.
Well, I will say, though, I mean, it was interesting because I've always just kind of blown these things off of rookie camp coming in and getting into the building, and the drills are one thing, but just familiarizing yourself with the staff and the environment and, most importantly, the playbook as you move forward and get closer to training camp. But we saw last year you didn't really have that. And the rookie class, I mean, it took a while for guys, and some of it was injury-related, obviously, with Isaiah Wilson, some different circumstances involved there. But it's crucial for this class, and two of the guys that are going to be the most crucial were not on the field this past weekend, and that is Molden and Farley in the secondary. But how beneficial do you think it can be for this rookie class to come in and have some sense of normalcy with this offseason and get in the building and get on the field and get into the playbook to be ready by the time training camp comes around?
Yeah, no, I mean it's got to help for sure. Now, of course, it's just like with that last year. Everybody else in the same boat then. Everybody's in the same boat now. But just from the Titans' perspective, when you get so little out of your rookie class, I think it's natural to look at that and say, would this have mattered? Now, like you said, Isaiah Wilson, that's a totally different situation. And with Fulton and Evans, those are injury situations. Does having spring stuff prevent those injuries? Probably not, but it still has to be a good thing. And look, this team, more than last year's team, this team needs that rookie contribution. I mean, Des Fitzpatrick, you're in there. Like you said, Farley and Molden, who aren't participating, but both those guys. I mean, if they're able to go, then they have a great chance of being key contributors right away. Dylan Radon's another guy who, by the way, I mentioned Fitzpatrick being very impressive interviews. So, so is Dylan Radon's. I mean, he's also, I've been impressed with him and talking to him about football and stuff. And a guy who, like, when you pick that guy in the second round, to me, it's like he's got to be the starter. He's got to win that job. Doesn't mean he will, but it's good for him to get in there and get as much as he can and get done and kind of have a running start into this competition with what we expect to be competition with Kendall Lamb at right tackle. So, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it, it's positive for them to be out there, and it's just a huge class and a huge story that a lot of this class makes an impact pretty early.
And then I know you and Mark touched on this the other day, but just looking at the schedule when it came out the other day for the Titans, I mean, the first thing that really caught my attention was that 4-game stretch beginning in mid-October against Buffalo, where you go Buffalo, Kansas City, at Indy, and at L.A. That's a 4-game stretch for this Titans team that could absolutely define the season coming up. So that's a heck of a 4-game stretch off this schedule. That's the first thing that I noticed with this Titans schedule. Like, my goodness, that 4 games right there, that's going to go a long way in determining what this season looks like for the Titans.
Yeah, and it's also a good start is going to go a long way because they're going to take some lumps. I mean, that's such a tough stretch. It's a lot to ask for a team to handle all those games. You gotta start fast, I think, if you're the Titans, and give yourself a little bit of cushion for that stretch. Real quick, since we're talking football, I do need to get Jared's take in here. Jared's texting me. So this is I want you guys to react to this. Jared says, one name for you, Carson Wentz. You tell me players don't lose their stuff in pro sports over being benched. Your thoughts?
In terms of Carson Wentz and the resentment that he holds? Well, again, I mean, play better.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, they got him out. So, I mean, there was probably resentment on the part of the Eagles, too. You drafted you to play better. You sucked this past year, so they got him out. So, I mean, yeah, he was probably mad about the situation.
They should resent him.
Yeah, exactly. So, I don't put much stock into that, no. Matter of fact, Jared,
right,
that's
we all agree.
That's half the reason he threw a party when the Colts signed him. I mean, you would have thought it was Christmas come early for Jared when the Colts signed Carson Wentz, or traded for Carson Wentz, excuse me.
Jared had very little resentment over that move. No resentment from Jared over Carson Wentz to Indy.
That's right. When we come back, we'll get back into the Nashville Predators. Look ahead at the series against Carolina. Who are our X factors in this series for the Predators coming up against the Hurricanes? Preds Pick to Click coming your way at 8:45. All that next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game.
Coach, it's been a week of prep now, the final full practice today. How do you feel about your club heading into game one against Carolina here tomorrow?
I like a lot about this week. We've had some time to rest and recharge, and guys have a lot of energy. I thought we've had really good practices, focused. So, we've done the best we can. We've really focused on ourselves. We know a lot about Carolina, but we feel like, our preparation has been really strong, and now it's time to play.
That was Predators head coach John Hines looking ahead to Game 1 coming up tonight for the Predators against Carolina. Puck drop at 7 o'clock, pregame at 6 o'clock here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. And taking your thoughts all show long on our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Joe, let's revisit our poll question of the day at 102.5 The Game on Twitter. What is your prediction for the Preds and Hurricanes in the first round for this series? Your options are the Hurricanes win in 4 or 5, the Hurricanes win in 6 or 7, the Preds win in 4 or 5, or the Preds win in 6 or 7 games. 304 votes are in. 46% say the Predators win in 6 or 7 games. 24% say the Canes in 6 or 7 games. 23% say the Canes in 4 or 5, and only 7% say the Predators win in 4 or 5 games. So right now, Joe, the Predators winning the series, still leading the way in 6 or 7 games on our poll question of the day at 102.5 The Game on Twitter.
Well, it balances out the homerism a little bit. The fact that, the 4 or 5 game Preds win is last. So, I think there's some realism within the homerism here.
Well, I thought with the comparisons that some make to 2017, we know what happened in the first round that year. It was 4 games for the Predators against Chicago.
Yeah,
I thought we might see 4 or 5 in Carolina, only 7%.
I mean, if it's 2017 all over again, it's sweep. It's
exactly.
A sweep. The sweep starts tonight.
That's right. That's what we can see.
Before we get into the X Factor, do you want me to give you Jared's retort here? Jared's going off here.
No, I don't.
I'm going to throw this at you real quick. No? Okay. All right, we'll come back to you later, Jared. I'll just text him then.
All right, so looking ahead at this series for the Predators against the Hurricanes, who is your X Factor for the series? And you can let us know on our text line as well, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Now, X Factor, I'm not talking about Philip Forsberg or Roman Josi, anybody like that. To me, that is not an X Factor. Maybe you disagree with that, Joe. I don't know. But I'm talking about a guy a little bit under the radar that could swing the course of this series. So, Joe, let's start with you. If you had to identify an X Factor for the Predators in this series against Carolina, who would that be?
Okay, so I'm allowed to pick Victor Arvidsson?
Sure.
Okay, well, then I pick Victor Arvidsson.
He's your X Factor?
So Victor Arvidsson is my X Factor. One thing that we kind of lost last year out of the bubble, we did talk a lot about Johansson. Then we talked a lot about that line playing really well. Arvidsson had 3 goals in those 4 games. And, previously he had 9 goals in 55 playoff games. Okay. And obviously, he did not have the greatest 2017 run, although he had 13 points in 22 games. He had 3 goals. He actually did pretty well in the 18 playoffs, 9 points, 5 goals in 13 games. But obviously, he was one of, like many of this forward group, who just did nothing at all in 2019 against Dallas, just was completely taken out of the series. It was actually, to me, like a big step for him last year to do what he did finishing. And the Preds need him to finish. One, we don't know about his health. I think he's going to play. Is he going to be fully Victor Arvidsson? Is he going to have that burst, that speed? I think that can change some games. And to me, he's a guy, like you said, we're going to focus on, Forsberg, of course, and Duchesne, of course, and Johansson. And we know that Granlund's been playing great, and the Herd line is going to set the tone. But I just think Arvidsson is that guy. If he can sneak in there and get you some timely goals, he can really make a difference and perhaps swing this thing.
I like it. Victor Arvidsson, the selection for the X Factor for Joe Rexrode. Ryan Porth, if you had to identify an X Factor for the Predators in this series against the Carolina Hurricanes, who would your pick be?
All 20 players on the ice.
That is not allowed.
No?
No.
Okay. I will go with Ryan Johansson because Ryan Johansson in past postseasons has been the straw that stirs the drink. And if Ryan Johansson comes out and plays his A game that we've seen in past playoff series, I really like their chance of being able to make this interesting against Carolina.
I'm going off the radar a little bit with mine because of the way that he's played since he's come in the lineup, but also the way I think the Predators are going to have to play in order to win this series. Give me Tanner Jeannot as my X factor. And the reason I say that is this. Number one, he brings the physicality that I think you're going to have to play with. But number two, as I think we've seen, the kid can play a little bit too. I mean, he's got some offensive touch to his game. And look, he's not Tom Wilson. I don't want anybody to say that. Obviously, he's not Tom Wilson in many ways in terms of the way he plays the game and the offensive ability that he has. But there is, I think, an edge to the way Tanner Jeannot plays the game. He had 5 goals in 14 games on the fourth line since coming in and being a mainstay there. He's got some offensive ability. I mean, he lit it up this year at the AHL level as well. So there is an offensive element to his game that I've been pretty impressed by since he's come in there, and I think the way he plays the game, we know this, Joe, John Hines not afraid to give that line some heavy minutes. I think Tanner Jeannot could end up being a pretty big factor in this series. I really do.
I like it, and in a way, it reminds me a little bit of like what Austin Watson was doing for this team for a period of time, in particular the 2017 run and 18. As a guy who, and of course those teams weren't as physical. And I'm not comparing him to like a Jeannot or an Olivier in terms of physicality, but a guy who also would get you that timely goal, had some skill, could do some things with the puck. It's been really impressive so far to see what he's been able to come in and do.
It has been, and he's a guy that has gone from a player that you didn't know much about heading into when he came into the lineup to now a player that I think pretty much everybody would agree Jeannot has become irreplaceable at this point in the lineup for what they do. At Fangfingers TN on Periscope says Eeli Tolvanen as the X factor. Now that's interesting because he is a guy that you look at what's going on right now with the lineup and the decisions that could be upcoming for John Hines. Maybe Tolvanen's in the lineup tonight. Maybe Tolvanen's not in the lineup tonight, but he is the type of player that can change a game on the power play. We saw it time and time again this year. Eeli Tolvanen just changing the game for the Predators on the power play with that shot that he has. I mean, you're talking about a player that if he's on special teams, that can be a difference maker for you in the series. That could be the difference maker for you in the series. Now the question is he going to be in the lineup enough to be that game-changing player as they move forward here?
Well, that's interesting because I actually was going to say my X factor for the Hurricanes is Eeli Tolvanen's resentment. It might consume the entire Nashville Predators organization, and this series could be over in 3. So, I mean, you could look at it both ways with Tolvanen.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said before, I think there's going to be a lot of lineup changes that take place here. And I think if you're the Predators, that's a luxury you have heading into this year that maybe you've not had. All of a sudden, with the young players coming in and playing the way that they have and the identity change that's taken place, there are options. There's depth with this group that I think you feel a lot better about than you did in years past. Now, the question still is going to be 5-on-5, can you generate enough offense? Like, I don't see the Predators winning this series if at least a couple of their big money players don't play well offensively. Like, you've got to have Philip Forsberg looking like Philip Forsberg. Like, he's got to come in there and play really well. I mean, obviously, we've spent so much time talking about Johansson and Duchesne here. But you've got to have those guys playing well. But I feel better about the prospects of getting some of that secondary scoring this year than I have in a long time. Like, when's the last time you felt good about a Predators team from a depth perspective going into a playoff series and you felt good about the secondary scoring? I mean, it's been a long time since I felt that way.
Yeah, I mean, like Benino, was a guy like last year who, I guess if you would count him as a guy who made things happen, and I thought brought the grit too. But that's, to your point, that's one of the comparisons that you can make between this and 17 potentially, and obviously that really got going in the playoff run as people kept getting hurt. Fiala, Johansson, Fisher, so many people getting hurt. You're bringing in guys and they're giving you timely goals. Aberg,
Yes.
obviously Freddie, Hockey, et cetera, et cetera. This team has guys you could see doing that in playoff series. Got to see if they actually do, but like it has that depth where you could see some real timely offensive moments from not the key players.
Listen to the game every weekday for your chance to win $1,000. It's the game's 1K payday presented by Kentucky Kingdom and Hurricane Bay. Listen for keywords at 9, noon, and at 3 o'clock. And when you hear it, go to thegamenashville.com and enter the keyword for a shot at $1,000. When we come back, it is time for Preds Pick to Click, brought to you by New Amsterdam Vodka. The Predators taking on the Hurricanes tonight in Game 1. Be the first caller at 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025 to guess the goal scorer tonight for the Nashville Predators. If you get it right, you'll win a prize pack brought to you by New Amsterdam Vodka. We'll do that next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game.
score! Who's going to find the back of the net in tonight's Preds game? Robby and Rexrode make their picks to click and welcome a listener to do the same. Pick to Click is brought to you by New Amsterdam Vodka, the official vodka of the NHL.
And it is that time of the day, time for Preds Pick to Click here on Robby and Rexrode, brought to you by New Amsterdam Vodka. The Predators taking on the Carolina Hurricanes tonight in Game 1 of the Stanley Cup playoffs. And it's time for Preds Pick to Click. The listeners and Joe Rexrode, I believe, still locked at 7. So the competition is still tied heading into this playoff run for the Predators. Ryan Porth has extended his lead on me back to 2 goals. 4 correct answers for Ryan Porth. Robbie Stanley remains at 2. So quite the competition still going on at the top between Rexrode and the listeners. And with that in mind, let's go to our 1025 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and welcome in today's participant, Caleb from Mount Juliet. Caleb, what's going on, man? How we doing?
Hey, guys. I'm good. How are y'all?
Doing well. Appreciate you taking time to call in this morning. So, Caleb, the Predators, they get underway in the playoffs tonight, taking on Carolina. Who is your pick to click for the Predators tonight against the Hurricanes?
All right. Well, last time I called in, I took old Joe Davy and Rex Croak's pick.
You did.
Against the Canes, yeah. And old Iron Hook didn't work out for me, but I'm going to stick with that line. Like the guy that's been going to the hard areas, feel pretty good about him, and take Luke Cunnin.
Luke Cunnin. I like it. So, Caleb going with Luke Cunnin. Caleb, thanks for calling in. Wish you good luck tonight in the competition.
Bye.
So Cunnin, the selection, that's got to be the first time Cunnin has been selected with the first pick. He's been taken in the competition, but Cunnin, the first pick off the board, Joe Rexrode.
I like it, and actually some texts on the text line have, and I think on Twitter too, have indicated Cunnin as a nice X factor too, and I like that. I mean, he's been playing really, really well, and they really need a variety of folks to step up and chip in offensively. So I like that one. A little bit off the grid.
It's off the grid, and he has been dynamite for the Predators as of late. So Caleb selecting Luke Cunnin today in the competition. Ryan Porth, you have the first pick between the three of us today. Who is your pick to click tonight for the Nashville Predators?
Caleb actually took my pick.
Really?
Yeah.
So you were both going to go with Luke Cunnin.
Uh-huh. So I'll go with old number 9.
Number 9.
Old reliable, the most popular name in the contest, Philip Forsberg.
I love how Porth's like, you know what? I guess I'll just have to go with that Forsberg guy tonight in the playoffs. Hate to do it. Got to go with number 9. Ryan Porth selecting Philip Forsberg
Mr.
in the
Clutch
competition here today. We'll see if he can remain Mr. Clutch tonight, starting in the playoffs. Joe Rexrode, you are up next in the competition. Who is your pick to click tonight for the Nashville Predators?
So we know for sure basically that we have 3 games, correct? Because obviously there's a Sunday.
Yeah.
So we know for sure that there are 3 games here in this competition. So I'm just trying to figure out exactly. Of course, we could have many, many more than that. We could have, who knows?
This go on for
months. I mean, I've had two players have given me the most success this year. My namesake and of course Matt Duchene. I'm tempted to take Victor Arvidsson. I just listed him as the X factor, but just because I'm not 100% sure on his health situation, I'm going to go with old reliable Joe Davion. Bring it on! It's the year of Yarncroke. Give me some Calle Yarncroke.
Calle Yarncroke selected by Joe Davion Rexcroke here in the competition. He carries forward his strong play from the regular season into the playoffs. So Luke Cunnin has been selected. Ryan Porth selects – who did you select again? Oh, yeah, Philip Forsberg. And then Joe Rexrode selecting Calle Yarncroke today here in the competition. Give me number 64, Mikael Granlund in the competition. I love the way he played all year long. I love the way he's been going to the front of the net. Granlund scores tonight for the Nashville Predators, and I'll say this, he scores the first goal for the Predators tonight. I'll even give you the goal he scores. The first one.
First goal for the Preds or the first goal of the entire game?
The entire game.
You can probably get some pretty good odds on that on your local sportsbook.
I bet you can. So I'm taking Granlund in the competition today. So Caleb from Mount Juliet selects Cunnin. Ryan Porth selects Philip Forsberg. Joe Rexrode going back with Old Faithful. Calle Yarncroke in the competition. And Robbie Stanley closing it out with Mikael Granlund. That is today's edition of Preds Pick to Click, brought to you by New Amsterdam Vodka.
So every member of the second line chosen for Game 1 Pick to Click.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. No herd line member. Didn't take a single member of the herd line.
Yeah, I thought about Trennan. I feel like Trennan might be trending to getting one, but
wow.
Going with thank you. Going with old reliable there though. Granlund has got to be like Granlund is the classic. He scores goals whenever we don't pick him, and then he does not score goals when we do.
He'll have like 3 assists tonight.
You're playing with fire there, Robbie. Yeah, exactly. Like he'll make all kinds of stuff happen, but not actually score.
Let's go back to our text line.
Maybe the postseason, it's a different game.
Could be. Absolutely. Different style of play in the playoffs for sure. Let's go back to our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. John from Clarksville texting in, who's in or out of the lineup, and could you see the possibility of moving Jeannot to the third line and putting Olivier back on the herd line? Do you think at any point that becomes a possibility in this series of John Hines just saying, you know what, move Tanner Jeannot up, put Olivier back on the herd line, and you're just going all rough and tumble on your bottom 6?
I'd be surprised if we ever see Olivier and Jeannot both in the lineup unless they're together on that herd line, like if Trennan gets hurt.
Yeah.
I would be surprised if they're anywhere but there.
Let's go back to the text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Josh from Lebanon texting in, Luke Cunnin is my X factor. If he plays the way he did a week ago Saturday that helped the Preds clinch the playoffs, that's another weapon that Carolina has to factor in their defense against the Predators. It is interesting. Like Luke Cunnin, I'll be honest, when he first started to play this year, I was like, man, I just don't know what this guy's role is going to be as they move forward. You gave up a lot to get him. I mean, Nick Bonino, we knew, was a really good player. He was a good player for the Predators last year. He's continued to be a good player for the Minnesota Wild this year. But Cunnin, since he's come back from injury, I mean, he's found his groove and he's found his gear on that second line with Yarncroke and with Granlund, to the point now where, like, I feel like you know what you're going to get out of Luke Cunnin. He is going to play very hard. He plays a direct north-south game, which I really like about his game, and he's shown in the last few weeks he's got some offensive pop to go along with it as well. So I think you feel pretty good about Luke Cunnin, not only heading into the series, but also like being a part of this future here. He's still young. He's a former first-round pick. He's a guy that I think you can really start to envision having a role here for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I mean, he looks like a guy who could really be a long-term top 6 guy potentially. And on the short-term front, Haula has been very good also recently, and Haula is going to be big in this series. I need to go to my text line.
Okay.
So you guys can understand what I'm dealing with. This is from Jared. Quote, on the Tolvanen front. Quote, you guys pretending Carson Wentz is complaining hasn't crippled the Eagles is laughable, absolutely laughable. Robbie said the Eagles didn't mind losing Wentz. I'm sorry, they hired a QB coach in Indy for him, and he still wanted out, and now they have a giant cap charge. No answer at QB. Robbie's team is dealing with the fallout of a player resenting his org. End quote.
So you're comparing Eeli Tolvanen to Aaron Rodgers. So the floor for Tolvanen is Philip Forsberg, and now he's Aaron Rodgers.
That just happened.
Interesting. I'll leave it at that.
I just wanted to present the information to you. Let you react as you like.
I appreciate that. Thank you for that. Let's go back to the text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Got a texter that says Saros is the obvious X factor for the Predators. Well, yes, but is that really an X factor? Like, can your goaltender that's been the best player in the league for the last month be the X factor? X factor is a little bit deeper cut.
The goaltender and the quarterback can't be the X factor. I think that's a good rule across the board. Goaltenders and quarterbacks, they are not X factors ever.
Like, I almost threw out Porth's X factor of Johansson because he's the first line center, but I decided to allow it.
That's close. That's very borderline.
He's giving me a look right now like, what are you talking about?
You don't know which version of 92 is going to show up.
I know.
Right. But
that's why he's an X factor.
No, but that's an A factor. That's a top of mind. Like, he's key. Like, to me, X factor means someone that you don't instantly think of as a key.
All right, you know who's the X factor then? You schmucks. Pete Rogers. Pete Rogers, the equipment manager,
Yeah,
is the X factor to the series. He's got to make sure the sticks and the helmets and everything are all ready to go, just like they've been in the last 2 months, so that the Preds can go out and pull this upset against Carolina. Give me a break. Ryan Johansson is an X factor.
He is fired up, Joe.
That's not bad. That's not bad. Mitch Korn, let's also give him X factor.
Coming back.
Brandon Howard. I mean, we got a lot we could go through in the organization.
Mitch Korn hasn't been in this organization in like 6 years.
He's still an X factor.
He was a good X factor yesterday, apparently, for the Islanders.
Apparently he was. When we come back, speaking of X factors, we have our own that we're going to bring in. Darren McFarland, host of Darren Donica Chase, will join us coming up. This is Robby and Rexrode, live from the wholesaling studios, powered by RumbleOn.com, here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in. Final hour of Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Ryan Porth here with you on this Monday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. The Nashville Predators taking on the Carolina Hurricanes tonight. Game 1 of the Stanley Cup playoffs finally here for the Predators. And to help us talk more about that, we welcome in our good friend Darren McFarland, host of Darren, Donick, and Chase, also handling the Predators pre- and post-game duties for the Nashville Predators radio network. Darren, what's going on, brother? How we doing?
The dynamic duo is back here on this Monday morning.
Yeah,
back
buddy.
at it.
That's right. Fresh off some Arizona sun. We're back in here, buddy.
Yeah. They were debating, were you in the Grand Canyon or not? That was interesting. Did you actually go in the Grand Canyon?
I went down into it a little bit, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I wasn't sitting there, gallivanting around with the antelopes or anything, but I was down there a little bit.
Yeah. You weren't sucking on any cactus juice or anything?
Didn't quite go down that way.
You guys weren't doing peyote. Well, that's good. That's
Yes.
good. We've seen movies. What happens with
have.
peyote, okay?
We certainly have. we avoided that on this trip. Maybe next time. We'll see what happens when we get back down.
The Predators win the Cup. Let's all go to the Grand Canyon
and
do some peyote.
Find some peyote together. Maybe that'll be something that happens.
Peyote out of the cup.
Yeah, maybe so.
Out of the cup. There we go. Now that is a party.
We could really get something going on that stuff.
I think we would make the news if we could do that. That would be awesome.
Yes, we would. So, Darren, it feels like it's been forever trying to get ready for this series and to get ready for this game. We're finally here, Game 1 taking place tonight. What are your thoughts on this matchup for the Predators, and what sort of Predators team do you expect to see come out in this series in terms of the way they want to attack Carolina?
I expect them to come out like the other teams in Game 1 that nobody's given a chance in taking Game 1 in the Stanley Cup playoffs, huh? How about the Minnesota Wild going into Vegas and shutting them out? Islanders, Barry Trotz and company getting a win over Pittsburgh. Well, I'll tell you what, Capitals, which I don't know if that's real. That's not really an upset. I picked the Bruins, but boy, that Lightning Panthers game, give me some more of that. That's going to be a fun series, right? That was fun last night.
Yeah.
I expect it to be high drama, like we've already seen in Game 1s. What's interesting is some things that I'm expecting is I think, like all of us, right, we're very curious to see what John Hines is going to do with this roster, because I think when you look at these teams, now that we saw them play each other 8 times, and the Predators went 2-5-1 against Carolina, winning the last 2, we know Carolina is just – they're ridiculous, right? Ridiculous forechecking team. They have so many boxes that they check, right? They've got loads of speed, high skill. Their passing ability is off the charts. Their forechecking, best in the league. They're big. They're not necessarily the most physical team in the league, but they're not afraid. They got big bodies. They just check. They're very good on defense. They do so many things right, but they really hang their hat right on their speed, right? Their speed and their skill. And it's impressive. It's why they very could have easily been the President's Trophy winner. But that didn't happen. So the Predators, do they have speed? Yes, but I know they don't want to play that game, right? It's like Golden State in their heyday, to give both of you two basketball nerds a little reference. Nobody wanted to go up and down the court with them, right? I mean, nobody said, hey, let's try to beat Golden State at their game. That's not really the way you want to attack them. And I don't think the Predators want to do that with Carolina. I mean, I think they actually want to drag them into the trenches and do what this team and what David Poile told us that he was going to do in the offseason is make this team a lot more physical team. He told us that, this team was going to have more grit, more, 40 grit sandpaper to them, and it played out that way this season. Now, Brendan Moore's a pretty good coach, at least in my opinion, and I can't imagine that I'm sure they've talked about it all week of not letting Nashville drag them into the trenches and try to slow this thing down, make it a physical series. Not that Carolina's allergic to a physical series, but I don't think that's necessarily what they want. So that's what I'm curious to see how this plays out, because I think something that everybody's trying to figure out with the lineups, right? What does that mean? I mean, if you're trying to do it, but can you pull it off? Is Cousins in there? Is Richardson in there? I mean, we're all trying to figure out, is Tolvanen going to be in the lineup? How he's going to play this out. But to me, the Predators want this to be a physical series. They want to do what they did these last 2 games, and Carolina wants to run away with it, Robby, and show off their speed and their skill set.
Well, you brought it up, Darren. What do you think John Hines' answer will be to that lineup question? And what would you do if you were sitting there looking at Ellie Tolvanen, knowing what he brings in the power play, but also knowing that he hasn't been as effective since coming back from injury?
Yeah, what would I do? I would have him in there, but I'm not sure that's going to be the answer. I'm not sure he's going to be in there. I suspect he will, but I don't know. I mean, it's like, for me, it's a little bit over 50% that he's in there. I think the interesting one that is right down the middle is Richardson or Cousins on that third line, right? Hall is going to be centering that third line, but who is going to get that nod? I don't think it's right. It's not going to be both of them. So who is it? I give a slight lean, and I feel like everybody I've talked to, this thing is right down the middle on who people think is going to be in there. I would give a slight lean to Richardson, and it's a lot more about just trying to read John Hines, the head coach. And so I think maybe the experience, I don't know. I think he's going to be in there. Like I said, Cousins is the guy you want in there because that's the style that you want. I'm just not so sure Carolina is going to allow that style. The ice tonight, they're going to use all 200 feet, and they're going to get after it. And I'm going to give the slight lean to Richardson. I would have Tolvanen in there, but I think he's going to make it, but I'm also not sure if he's going to be in there.
Darren McFarland, host of Darren Donick. Jace also handles the Predators pre- and post-game duties for the Nashville Predators radio network, on with us here on Robby and Rexrode.
That answer was sponsored by Waffle House, and I'm sorry, Joe, but I don't know. I mean, I know there was a lot of back and forth, but I honestly, I wish I had a definitive answer, but I'm truly just as curious as everybody else to see how this plays out.
Well, Darren, with that in mind, we were talking in the last segment about the X factor in this series for the Predators. If you had to identify one X factor, who would it be? And I'm not talking the obvious names of, the Saroses and the Forsbergs of the world. Who is one guy that you would identify as an X factor in this series?
Yeah, I heard you guys were giving your boy Porth a little bit of, some stuff for his pick.
He deserved it.
Wow.
Well, man, you guys are still relentless on Ryan. Okay. I'm going to
He's got Laviolette as his X factor.
Yeah.
I am going to go with Kyle Granlund. I think they need Granlund to be the guy that he's been all year. I think he is so vitally important to this team with what he can do, because he does it all, and so many things go through him, and he is a creator of so much. He's also been productive. I think Granlund just needs to make sure he keeps doing what he's been doing. They can't have Granlund disappear in this series and expect to have a chance. There's no chance of that, in my opinion. He's just too important. We've seen it all season long. He has been a rock for this roster. He has been a steady force for them. You have known night in and night out what you're getting from Kyle Granlund, and so I would say, to me, Granlund's the X factor. In other words, he has to keep doing what he's been doing. He cannot disappear, or, in my opinion, they don't have a chance.
So, Darren, we make a lot of these
on that. I got crickets,
no? No, I like that pick. And that counts. And I think Granlund is on the right side of what could be an X factor.
Yeah, get out of here, Porth.
So, yes,
Granlund had more points than Johansson this season.
So, how much did he get paid?
Well,
all right then.
One of them is your number one center, and one isn't, But
well, one has played like a number one center this year, and one hasn't.
He's not going to let this go.
That's how an X factor, rises to the occasion. So outstanding X factorness from Granlund. All right, so Darren, on Saros. I know I'm making a big deal of this. A lot of people making a big deal of this. It's one postseason series, but I do feel like this maybe helps chart the course for the future of that position for the Preds. And, he's going to be the starter next year. We know that regardless of what happens. But do you feel like this is a big find out what Saros is and what he can be moment?
Joe, I think it's a fair question because, right, we haven't seen that yet. And here's his opportunity. Yes, he got the opportunity last year. I think there were a lot of other X factors involved in why this team was unable to get out of that series against Arizona. They had a lot of issues that they addressed in the offseason, and the play in front of him got a whole lot better. But to answer your question, yeah, I really do, because I think UC Saros has answered the bell, right? We wanted to know what he would look like as a full-time starter. He was in a role this year that he's never been in. He's always been the sexy backup, and everybody loves the sexy backup in a lot of sports, right? The guy who can come in short stints and win you games, and everybody gets excited about that. And then you never know, though, truly, when they become whether it's the every down quarterback or the guy in between the pipes for a bulk of a season, how it's truly going to play out. Some guys you see like, okay, all right, they should have been the starter. And then some guys you see out there as the full-time starter, and you go, yeah, you could see why he's the backup. He's a much better backup. Obviously, UC Saros has checked off all the boxes. I mean, he's a tremendous goaltender. He's had another unbelievable year. I think he's proven everybody that he can be a starter that carries, the workload for a long hockey season. But now he's got to do it on the big stage, right? Because that's how athletes get judged. Ultimately, this is the final box to get checked. And can he now will this team to a series win? Can he now will this team to get on a long Stanley Cup playoff run? And so, yeah, I do think it's a fair question. I think everybody's curious to see how it's going to look. This team, the second half of the season, has played really well, and they got rewarded for it. They won 20 of their last 28 games, and now can they keep that up and find a way to beat the number one seed in Carolina? And look, it's just like Granlund. If they don't have UC Saros, I mean, I know these are stating the obvious, but Saros and Granlund, in my opinion, are two guys that you have to have them. Like you don't have a chance against a team like Carolina if they're not peak performers. So UC Saros is going to have to answer that question by playing huge for them to have a chance to move on to the second round. So yeah, I do think all eyes are going to be on him to see if he answers the bell in this spot.
Darren McFarland, host of Darren, Donick, and Chase, also handles the Predators pre- and post-game duties for the Nashville Predators Radio Network, has been our guest, joins us every Monday at 9 o'clock here on Robby and Rexrode. You can catch him each weekday 10 to 2 here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Darren, great stuff as always, my friend, and thankfully we'll have an actual hockey game to talk about tonight. Looking forward to it.
No doubt about it, guys. Always fun. Thank you. Have a great rest of your show.
Absolutely. When we come back, we'll continue the discussion on the Nashville Predators. Get to some of your texts on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. And speaking of the Predators, this week, 102.5 The Game will be on the road with your chance to win tickets to games 3 and 4 for the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs between the Preds and the Hurricanes at Bridgestone Arena. Today, Stillman Company will be broadcasting live at Boom Boss Craft Pizza and Tap House in East Nashville from 2 to 6 for your chance to win a pair of tickets to Game 3.
There will also, I'm hearing, be a lot of Pred swag out there that you could get.
So make sure you drop by Boom Boss Craft Pizza and Tap House today in East Nashville for Stillman Company from 2 to 6. We'll be right back here on Robby and Rexrode, ESPN 102.5 The Game. This Friday, it's your chance to participate in the Nashville SC Pick to Click, brought to you by Camarena Tequila. If you guess correctly, a player that scores a goal in the game this Sunday night, you win a prize pack and a pair of tickets to an upcoming Nashville SC home game. The next chance to participate is coming up on Friday morning at 9:45. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Streaming live on Periscope, on YouTube, and on Twitch as well. Taking your thoughts on the Predators and the Hurricanes on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Pierre McGuire from NBC Sports joining us here at 9:30 on the program. So looking forward to his thoughts on this series and all things Stanley Cup playoffs coming up here at 9:30. Joe, let's go back to the text line. Got a texter that says, if it happens and Pekka gets playing time, how do you think he will do? Do you think the fans and teammates might feed off of it, knowing he's getting older and might not get much more time? So if it breaks out this way and either Saros isn't playing well or he gets hurt and Pekka's got to go in there and play, what's your confidence level if he's got to go in there and play at this point based on what we've seen out of Pekka Rinne this season?
Well, I think he could come in and do a good job. But as far as the team feeding off that or whatever, like you're not increasing your incentive, your effort, your intensity, your any of those words. You're not increasing it from being in the playoffs. No. Right? Like Pekka comes in and all of a sudden everybody's going to play harder. You know, I mean, no.
Well, you shouldn't. Let me put it that way, because if you are, that's a problem.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't think it has any sort of like positive impact on like team performance, but I think he could come in and if you're the Preds, look at the rest of the field. You know, the Preds may be the last team in, and some people have the lowest tier by themselves. I don't know how many teams could feel better about their goalie situation than the Preds should right now, because they do have a guy in reserve who has done big things in this tournament multiple times. So that's certainly one of the things that you put in the positive category for the Preds.
Joe, I was looking at the predictions that came out over the weekend. I don't think this is a huge surprise. I picked the Hurricanes to win this series in 6 games before I left last week, and very popular pick on ESPN, The Athletic, NHL.com, whatever websites you want to find. I think ESPN had 16 out of 16 analysts pick the Hurricanes to win this series against the Predators. Does that surprise you? Did you think more people might pick the Predators? Is it about what you thought in terms of the expectations for the Predators externally heading into this series? What's kind of been your reaction to what you've seen from the national media over the weekend?
It's about what I thought. I actually, if I'm surprised by anything, it's that my publication has 7% picking the Preds to win this series, and I want names put to the percentage.
That's right.
Good, good for them. Go out on a limb a little bit. I'm not shocked that like ESPN, Sportsnet, there's 0. I'm not shocked by that. You figure maybe there'd be a straggler here or there. So at your NHL.com, there is one.
Yep.
Who is it again?
Mike Morial from NHL.com. He is the lone person to pick the Predators.
The lone wolf. But no, it's not. And look, I know in this town you can say, well, what? You guys haven't been watching them play. You haven't noticed the change. You haven't seen that Saros been the best goalie. All those things. They all make a compelling argument. And I think the pressure that the Hurricanes are encountering for the first time as a group also is part of it. But a lot of these people picking the Preds to lose this series also are picking Carolina to win the Cup. I mean, that's how good this team is. You got to keep that in mind. I mean, to me, the disrespect, I think Corey Curtis said this well, the disrespect would come from actually picking against the Hurricanes. You know, they are the favorite. They're the 1 seed. They are on the short list of probably 4 or 5 teams that I would expect one of those 4 or 5 teams to hoist the cup at the end of this.
Matt on YouTube says, I think the Preds play their best hockey in the underdog role, but how much of a chance do they really have to win this series? It's got to be under 30%, right? I don't know if it's under 30%. I saw Mike Kelly from the NHL Network talking about this on the broadcast, and they put equations and percentage chances on every series heading into it. He had the Predators right around 35% in this matchup against Carolina. At the end of the day, does that really mean anything? No. But to Matt's point, like, they're going to be a heavy underdog heading into this series. And I think the predictions that we've seen also go along with that as well, where if you're a Predators fan right now, you've got to kind of embrace that role. And I do wonder, like, not only from the underdog part of this, but I talked about it as well from Carolina's point of view. Like, this is the first time that Carolina has gone into a playoff run where they've got a lot of expectations on them. They are massive favorites in this series according to the media, and they're a team that's not really dealt with that yet in terms of being the favorites heading into a playoff. They got through a magical run a couple of years ago to the Eastern Conference Final, and they were the darling of the NHL. Even last year, going up against the Rangers, a lot of people picked the Rangers to win that series. This is the first time that this group in Carolina has had to deal with expectations like this, and as we've seen firsthand, sometimes that can be a lot for a team to try to deal with. So I'm interested not only to see how the Predators handle the role of being the underdog, but to also see how does Carolina handle the role of being a favorite in this series.
Yeah, a favorite. Also a team that, I think the counteract to that is a lot of talk about the physicality.
Yeah.
A lot of questioning. So even though they're the favorite, that's what people bring up. Again, I talked to Brian Boucher last week, and that's what he brought up. Maybe the Preds, the way they play, we saw it in the one game. Well, we saw it in both games, but like, again, you take more out of the game with both teams with their full lineups. Maybe that is the formula. Maybe this matchup isn't great for Carolina, which, again, is weird to even think about. The idea of someone saying in a postseason series, the Preds' physicality might be a little bit too much for you. This is not something that we're used to hearing or talking about, but that's what they've become. But I do think that Carolina, the pressure of being a favorite, I think Rod Brindamore is probably using that narrative a lot and saying, okay, they say that they're going to push us around. They want us in a phone booth. Well, we can get in a phone booth too.
Some breaking news is coming from Chip Alexander, who covers the Hurricanes for the Raleigh News and Observer. Jacob Slavin on the ice for morning skate for the Hurricanes. So we talked about Jacob Slavin got hurt last Saturday against Nashville. I think their best defenseman that they have. What was his status going to be? He is on the ice for morning skate. I would expect that he's going to play tonight against the Predators. So we'll see what happens on that front. When we come back, we'll be joined by Pierre Maguire from NBC Sports. We'll look ahead to this series with him and look ahead at the rest of the Stanley Cup playoffs as well. All that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. 102.5 The Game and T-Mobile have partnered up to give you a chance to experience a Nashville SC game this season. Tune in later today and every Monday to Darren, Donick, and Chase for the keyword to text in to win. Good luck from 102.5 The Game, T-Mobile, and Nashville SC. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Ryan Porth here with you on this Monday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. We are efforting Pierre McGuire from NBC Sports to join us, looking ahead to this series for the Predators against the Carolina Hurricanes and a playoff run that, Joe, it's been awesome. The first weekend of the playoffs here in the NHL, we've had some overtime games. The one game that didn't go to overtime was, I think, the best of them all. Last night, Tampa Bay with Braden Point scoring the game winner to make it 5-4 with about a minute left in regulation. That Tampa Bay-Florida game last night was one of the best hockey games I've seen in a long time. It was a fantastic game last night to watch. Like, if you're a casual sports fan and you're not watching, like, you're not all that much into hockey, last night is the type of game that turns you into a hockey fan.
Yeah, I mean, I was yelling at the TV multiple times, like, holy crap, look at this, and then look at this. It was just nonstop. I mean, it was at a – the thing is, every game was good because every game is good. I mean, really. You get the occasional clunker, somebody blows someone out in the playoffs. For the most part, you should watch every Stanley Cup playoff game you can watch, okay, if you like sports. But that game, even compared to the other games, the pace, just the skill, intensity, everything, it was different. That series is going to be spectacular, and I will say I agree with what Darren said. I mean, Minnesota, or maybe that was Corey who said that earlier. Minnesota, that's a stunner. To hold Vegas without a goal beyond 60 minutes of hockey, that is something else, quite a feat. So right away from the start, we've gotten some surprises. I guess if you're the Preds or a Preds fan, you hope it's kind of like save some shots for the next game.
Yeah.
It's like, if all these other series go sideways, some of them have to be chalk, right?
You would think so. But if you're the Predators, you're hoping to keep that trend going tonight, coming out with a good start against Carolina. By the way, we were kind of wondering who's going to be in goal for Carolina to begin this series, and it looks like we may have our answer. Now, there's a three-headed monster basically at goal for Carolina, and James Reimer's been a part of that, and that's not really been the case as much as of late. It's basically been between Peter Mrazek, who has great numbers against the Predators, and also Alex Nedeljkovic as well. And it looks like Nedeljkovic is going to be in there tonight for the Hurricanes. He is in the starter's crease at the morning skate, and you're talking about, Joe, going up against a kid who's played very well down the stretch for Carolina, but also someone that has no experience whatsoever in the playoffs heading into this. So I guess you can kind of view this goaltending matchup a couple of different ways if you're the Predators. Now, I will say, I think the Hurricanes, maybe more so than other teams around the league, if you can chase Nedeljkovic, Brind'Amour is not going to wait very long before he goes to Mrazek. I think they've got a ton of confidence in whoever they put in there. But I guess if you're a Predators fan viewing this, you do have, and we talk about the lack of experience for UC Saros in the playoffs. He is the more experienced playoff goaltender heading into this matchup when it comes to him and Alex Nedeljkovic.
Do you think that Mrazek's bad finale was any kind of role in this?
I don't think so. I mean, a lot of people point to the success that Mrazek has had against Nashville, and I get it. I mean, I think he, up until that night, was 10-1 against the Predators in his career. So, I mean, there's something to that, and obviously a lot of that came while he was with the Red Wings, and the Red Wings were no good, which is still one of the most interesting things about this when it comes to the Predators and the Red Wings, looking back at that. But no, I mean, the way Nedeljkovic played down the stretch, I always thought he was going to be the guy to start this series. I'm not surprised they're going with him in game one.
Pop quiz, where's Nedeljkovic from?
I have no clue.
What would be your guess?
I don't know. Europe somewhere. Where's he from?
Ohio.
Are you serious?
I'm dead serious.
All
He's
right.
from Parma, Ohio.
Really?
Yeah.
Who could forget? Have you been to Parma, Ohio?
No, I have
Okay,
not.
all right.
I have not. But I noticed that last week or the week prior that he was not from Czech Republic.
Okay.
Which would have been my guess, and I would have lost a lot of money on FanDuel if that was, a prop. Where's Nedeljkovic from?
Parma, Ohio.
I would have said Czech Republic.
Yeah. Could have been from Climax, Michigan, but nope, Parma, Ohio. Got to stick with it.
Yeah, not a lot of goalies coming out of Climax, Michigan.
That is sure. You look at the numbers for Nedeljkovic this year. And he got 23 games this year, 15-5-3, a .932 save percentage, and a 1.90 goals against. So he's been very good for Carolina. Now, I think part of what makes Carolina so good, regardless of who's in goal, is the way they play in front of him. Like the way they play defense in front of their goaltender has been their strength. And we talk about it. They've got a great forward lineup. Their defense, I think, is among the deepest in the entire National Hockey League. If I'm listing out the strengths of Carolina when you're breaking down those three position groups, I still put goaltender at third. So I guess you can feel good either way about that if you're the Predators. If you can get to him, maybe that rattles his confidence early. But I think, it's funny to think about, but experience-wise, UC Saros has got the edge in between the pipes heading into this matchup.
Yeah, it's going to be a small group that you can say that for him, in comparison to the other guy. But it's interesting, and I think Sarah Sivian, who of course covers the Canes for us at The Athletic, she had an interesting point last week about the goaltending situation. Like it's almost like I think there's definitely the expectation that we could see both guys somewhat early. Yep. Now, of course, if you're the Canes and you play great and you win and you're not giving anything up, great. But the idea that, we could see both early and that it might help if like one of them is just way better than the other, and then they just kind of go with that guy. But if you're the Preds, you like the fact that, that they're in that situation, I think, that there's some uncertainty because I just feel like if you're a team that has a guy who's rolling like the Preds are, there's a certain confidence that gives you. Not to say that Carolina wouldn't be confident in either guy, but I just don't think that's where you want uncertainty. And we've seen teams make deep runs with, using multiple players, multiple goalies, and it can work out fine. But I don't know that it's – I just think if you're checking pros and cons, edges for the Preds, there aren't a lot, but that to me is certainly one of them.
Well, I think so. And I think we were talking about it. Could there be some carryover between the last couple of games that the Predators closed this thing out with in the regular season and this playoff series? I thought Nedeljkovic was fine in the game they played here on that Saturday night. I thought Mrazek was shaky. So if you can run Nedeljkovic early and get him out of there and get them to the point where they're thinking about making a goaltending change, I think you got confidence with the way you played against Mrazek in that last game. If you can create some doubt there in Brendamore's mind and in the minds of those two goaltenders, how many times have we seen that happen in a playoff series where goaltending just starts to spiral? Like, we joke about this sometimes and think back to the loss of Johansson and Fisher in that Anaheim series, but we often forget, like, Gibson in Anaheim was out in those last couple of games, and Bernier had to come in, and the Predators just lit him up. I mean, that's one of those things where if you don't have two goalies that you feel great about, if you're Carolina, that can be a problem in a playoff series. I think the Predators feel great about their goaltending right now. I think Carolina feels good about their goaltending right now, but just based purely on the goaltenders themselves, I think the edge is pretty clearly for the Predators.
And, of course, we come back around to – it's going to be a bigger challenge for Saros, I think, than his counterpart, whoever it is, just because I think we've seen enough of Carolina this year. They are tough to handle. They're tough to deal with. They create chances. They're going to be fast tonight. They're going to be fast in this series. They jump all over you. And, I expect Saros to be in a position where he's going to have to really rise up and equalize things. So it's not necessarily the best position to be in, especially when you're a guy like him who's sort of, you're still trying to chart your path here in this league in terms of long-term with this franchise. This is a very tough assignment, but the way he's played, you've got to think that he's going to be up for it.
When we come back, we will revisit our poll question of the day and also get some predictions from Ryan Porth and Joe Rexrode as well. Who's going to win this series between Carolina and the Nashville Predators? All that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Ryan Porth here with you on this Monday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. Let's revisit our poll question of the day at 102.5 The Game on Twitter. What is your prediction for the Preds and Hurricanes in this first round series that gets underway tonight? Puck drop at 7 o'clock, pregame at 6 o'clock here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. And the options are this: the Hurricanes win in 4 or 5 games. The Hurricanes win in 6 or 7 games. The Predators win in 4 or 5 games, or the Predators win in 6 or 7 games. The Preds at 6 or 7 games is the winner of our poll question. 46% say the Preds win in 6 or 7. 25% say the Canes win in 6 or 7. 22% say the Hurricanes win in 4 or 5 games. And 7% say the Predators win in 4 or 5 games. So, Joe Rexrode, the final results say the Predators win in 6 or 7 games. 46% of the vote. Your reaction to the results of our poll question today at 1025 The Game on Twitter.
I expected that category to win. I'm actually a little surprised the Preds in 4 or 5 was the distant fourth.
I am too.
A little bit surprised by that. So the Preds fans who think their team's going to win at least think it will be a challenge. So that's good.
There's not a whole lot of calls for a sweep in this series, but you know what? We'll see what happens. You can't sweep them without winning game 1. That's the wisdom that I'm going to dole out today here on the show. There can't be a sweep without winning game 1.
That's a very true statement.
That's what we do here on the show.
2017, it was a sweep, so.
It was. A lot of comparisons being thrown around. So with that in mind, I've already given my prediction in this series. I have Carolina winning this series in 6 games. I think the Predators are going to make a series of it. I think it's going to be competitive. But at the end of the day, I just think Carolina has too much firepower on the table. Joe Rexrode, let's start with you. Your prediction for this series between the Predators and the Carolina Hurricanes, how do you envision this series playing out?
I'll go 1 game beyond you. I'm going to go Hurricanes in 7. I think we're going to see how great they are in the course of this series. I think we're going to see how much the Preds have changed. I think it's going to be a really good series. Both sides obviously going to get their shots in, they're going to win games. It's going to come down to it, and I think at home, the better team is going to end up prevailing in 7.
So Carolina in 7 by Joe Rexrode. Robby Stanley taking Carolina in 6.
Better not go 7 games.
Ryan Porth. Hey, I know that's not good news for you. If it goes 7 games, that's for
it
sure.
Is not.
Ryan Porth, your prediction for the series between the Predators and the Carolina Hurricanes.
Is this really going to shock you?
No.
Preds in 6.
There you go.
Preds in 6 is my official prediction, and I'm not just saying that. It's something I believe in. I feel like this team has been playing playoff hockey for the last month and a half, and it doesn't make sense on paper why the Preds would beat the Canes, but how many upsets in the Stanley Cup playoffs over the years do make sense?
Sure.
When it's going into the playoffs. And I think with a hot goaltender, we all know that can be a great equalizer. And UC Saros has been playing fantastic for the last 2 months. I would not expect that to change. And the physicality, I think, is going to get under Carolina's skin, and they end up prevailing in this series in 6 games.
So Ryan Porth selecting the Predators in 6. Joey from Gallatin on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, also selecting the Predators to win in 6 games as well. Just got a text that says Preds in 4. So the Preds generating some momentum here on the text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, especially like if the Preds – if they can win this one tonight and get up early in this series, how do you respond if you're Carolina? Now, they've got some playoff experience. Like, they've got some guys that have been through this before, and I've seen people overreact all the time to a Game 1 win by a team. But I will say, like, if you're the Predators and you can go out and get one tonight, all of a sudden that confidence is going to be pretty high. Like, I thought it was important for them, especially in that Saturday game, to get a win against Carolina, to show that they can do it for themselves. If you can come out and play that same style tonight and you win again, then I think you're really going to start to see some confidence flowing from this Predators team. This is a massive one tonight, and I think early on you're probably going to have to weather a storm if you're the Predators. Like, I would expect Carolina – you see what I did there?
Yeah.
I would expect Carolina to come out there in the first 10 minutes – and they're going to be humming. Can you handle that if you're the Predators? That, to me, is going to go a long way to whether or not they can win this game tonight.
So the Preds are going to be facing a storm from the Hurricanes?
Thank you. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Cool. Well done.
Thanks.
By the way, the game one winner of the last 15 series involving the Nashville Predators have gone on to win the series. So game 1 has usually been a good barometer for the rest of the series.
Yep.
And the Preds have to get one of these two. I mean, because when you talk about pressure, it will shift squarely to them, and it'll be great to be home and all that stuff, but the pressure will have taken a big shift. The Preds will go from low pressure to high pressure, if you want to continue the weather puns. If they come back here and are down 0-2, they gotta get one.
Frank on the text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, says, "Are you guys sick of previews and predictions? Let's get this series started already." Yes, we are sick of previews and predictions. This feels like it has taken forever to get around to this game one. I don't know if it's just because they've been playing every other day basically for the last 2 months, but this feels like an eternity from Pekarine's game last week until now.
Not quite what it felt like before, like the playoffs last year in Edmonton, but yes, it's especially with all these great playoff games going on. It's exciting to finally get this going. So yes, Frank, very sick of it.
Got a texture that says the Preds will choke and lose this in 4 games. So that took a turn on the text line.
Was that Ben?
No.
Because Ben is always doom and gloom.
I don't think it was Ben.
Okay.
4 games. I don't anticipate a sweep either way. That would just be my guess.
Who said all of the sudden?
I don't know.
All of the sudden.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Someone is very angry. It says it's all of a sudden, not all the sudden, all in all caps.
I don't know.
Text line is just all over the place.
All over the place today on the text line. We'll be all over the place tomorrow covering this Predators game. Game 1 tonight for the Predators. Puck drop at 7 o'clock, pregame at 6 o'clock here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. That does it for us today here on Robby and Rexrode. Darren, Donick, and Chase is coming up next. This is ESPN 102.5 The Game.